Good evening. In a perfumer's workshop in Grasse, southern France, around 1720, where sun-warmed limestone floors hold fallen petals, copper alembics murmur with rose water, lavender hangs from the beams, amber glass catches the first slant of light, and the costliest perfume ingredient in the room may be ambergris, a strange gray lump from the sea that begins, against all reason, inside a whale. I am glad you are here again, Kieran in London and Naomi in Auckland, since you both commented on the last video and stayed with me to the end. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just as they did. And if you want these quiet journeys each night, please like and subscribe so you can fall asleep easily every episode. Have you ever noticed that a room can tell you who lives there before you see a single face? Tonight, your nose opens the door first. Warm stone breathes upward through the boards beneath your palate, while rose steam, dry lavender, ash, clean soap, and a sly thread of musk fold into the dim loft air. By the time you stir in the loft, Celeste has already filled 2 vials below you, and Maitre Bouchard has already left a note about the memory of the rose. You wake before your eyes quite agree to the plan. Your blanket is rough wool on the outside and softer where years have worn it smooth. Your cheek still rests in the cool hollow it has made in the linen pillow. The loft holds the night a little longer than the street below. Even so, morning has climbed the stair and scent long before it reaches the boards and light. You lie still for a moment and sort the air. That is not laziness here, that is training. Rose water reaches you first. It comes up warm and damp from the still room below, like a hand pressed over a cup. Then comes lavender. It is drier and clearer. It has the clean edge of folded shirts and old wooden chests. Then the fire speaks. It smells of charcoal waking slowly under ash. It smells patient and busy at once. You can tell the first distillation fire has been lit before dawn. The workshop never fully sleeps in flower season. It only closes one eye. Somewhere beneath the sweeter smells, you catch soap. It is plain olive soap from Marseille. It smells clean in a firm and practical way. Under that sits beeswax, under that sits cork, under that sits old wood rubbed with spilled oil. Each thing keeps its own little corner of the air. And then there is musk. It is only a faint line this morning. It curls at the edge of everything and refuses to explain itself. That means La Sauvette is probably still in her cage. Probably is the best word available. La Sauvette treats cages as suggestions. She treats workshop order as a personal insult. You keep your eyes shut and make a map. The rose water means the alembics are already running. The lavender means yesterday's bundles still hang from the beams. The soap means someone washed the marble slab before you woke. The musk means the back courtyard remains morally complicated. This is what your life has become in Grasse. Before your feet touch the floor, the world arrives through your nose in layers. Other people wake to bells or birds or drafts at the window. You wake to bergamot ghosts in a rag. You wake to yesterday's iris root in your sleeves. You wake to proof that scent does not stay politely where it is put. That is the first real lesson of the trade. Fragrance travels ahead of rank, ahead of money, and ahead of manners. It gets there before the person does. A merchant can be heard by his boots. A priest can be heard by the chapel bell. A perfumer arrives half a street early. You know this because the town tells you so every day. Grasse sits up on its hill, with the sea somewhere beyond, though not always in sight. The roads twist toward it like ribbon dropped by a distracted seamstress. Stone houses rise close together in warm colors that hold the sun. Lanes narrow and turn as if the town was built by cats in baskets. Beyond the walls and roofs, the land opens into terraces and plots. Flowers occupy the slopes with impressive confidence. Humans behave as if they are in charge. Here the year is not counted only by months. It is counted by blossom. It is counted by what must be picked before the heat ruins it. Jasmine wants dawn. Roses also want dawn. Orange blossom has its own mood, as if it is too important for an ordinary schedule. Lavender can wait a little longer. It hangs, dries, and behaves more sensibly. You are fond of it for this reason. Grasse is in its own powdered and sunlit way a kind of fragrant Silicon Valley. Everyone wants the next perfect formula. Absolutely no one has invented work-life balance. Flower growers hurry downhill with baskets. Distillers tend their fires. Soap makers cure pale bars in storerooms that smell almost edible. Glove makers still remember when this town was known more for leather than flowers. Perfume and gloves remain old friends here. Both understand the value of covering inconvenient truths gracefully. In nearby houses, people scent their linen chests with lavender and rosemary. They wash hands in rose water when they can afford it, or in herb water when they cannot. They burn sprigs of thyme in the hearth. They hang bunches of rue by the door. They tuck orange peel near the stove and call it housekeeping. At chapel, incense rises and makes stone smell holy. At supper, a pomander may pass from hand to hand and receive more admiration than the roast. Scent lives everywhere here. It lives in worship, washing, courting, dressing, trading, storing, airing, and pretending the drains are someone else's problem. That is one hidden truth of perfume. It is not only for the neck of a duchess. It is for cupboards, collars, gloves, bed linen, and plain Wednesday afternoons. You begin to understand this before you fully sit up. The loft around you is small and practical. The ceiling slopes low enough that you have learned respect for the beam above your head. A single tiny window watches the roofs and a slice of pale sky. Your trunk sits under it with one cracked leather strap and two hopeful hinges. A stool holds yesterday's shirt, a peg holds your apron, another peg holds your better apron, which is mostly a myth. You push back the blanket and swing your feet down carefully. The board is cool at first touch, then warm where the day has started underneath it. Petals cling to your stocking from yesterday. This seems romantic until you remember they are mostly crushed rose and one stubborn bit of marigold. You brush them off, and some fall between the boards. Grass probably has a very lovely dust under its floorboards. It is still dust. You sit for a moment and listen. Below, the copper alembics make their soft working noises. They do not bubble dramatically. They murmur like people who know exactly what they are doing. A cork taps lightly against glass. A drawer closes. Footsteps cross the limestone with the calm pace of someone already ahead of you. That will be Celeste. Celeste is 6 months your senior, which in this workshop amounts to about 40 years of smug authority. She never needs to say this. Her vials say it for her. She smells faintly of jasmine absolute at all hours. No one knows how she manages this. You suspect sorcery or very good hand washing. Her formulas seem to succeed on the first attempt with insulting regularity. Your own formulas prefer to become educational. When you spill, she appears with a clean cloth before you ask. It is somehow worse than laughter. Still, you are glad she is there in the mornings. It is nice when one person in the room understands what the master means by sentences involving weather and memory. You rub sleep from your face and reach for your shirt. It is plain linen with a collar softened by repeated washing. It smells faintly of starch and lavender. The linen feels cool first, then quickly warms against your skin. You shake it once and put your arms through carefully. Buttons are a negotiation at this hour. Your stockings come next. They are wool and not sentimental about the matter. They simply go on and expect gratitude later in winter. You pull on your breeches and tie them. You fasten your waistcoat. You smooth the front with both hands, though no one in the still room cares. Perfume work likes order, even when perfume itself refuses to keep any. Your apron waits on the peg like a small daily oath. It is thick enough to protect your clothes from oil, wax, and the more educational syrups. You lift it by the neck loop and settle it over your shirt. The cloth lands with familiar weight against your chest and knees. That weight always steadies you. Then comes the time. You draw the tapes behind your back. You cross them once. You bring them around again so the knot sits flat and does not jab your spine. You pull until the apron hugs your waist. Then you make a bow you can undo with sticky fingers. This is important. Perfume apprentices learn many noble arts. If the knot is too loose, the apron slips and drags. If the knot is too tight, you spend the morning breathing like a suspicious accordion. Today the knot feels right. You give it one last tug. You are ready to smell of honest work by breakfast. You kneel by your trunk and gather the small tools that mark your place in the workshop. They are not grand, but they matter more than grand things. There is your little knife for scraping resin and trimming wicks. There is your wax pencil, blunt but loyal. There are your folded papers for blotting and testing. You keep a bit of twine in one pocket. You keep spare corks in another. You keep a handcloth tucked through the apron band because experience has educated you. There is also a small spoon with a bent handle. It is useless for soup and perfect for powders. You guard it like treasure. That is another hidden truth of skilled work. Mastery often looks less like a crown and more like a pocket full of odd tools. You stand and roll your shoulders once. Your body remembers yesterday's lifting and grinding. Nothing aches everything mentions itself politely. The loft smells strongest near the stair hatch. The air there rises warm and damp from the still room. It carries rose, wood smoke, and something green from fresh stems. You move toward the window first. You always do. Morning enters in a narrow stripe. It brings cooler air from outside, and a little town noise folded inside it. You look down over Grasse while fastening your cuff. Roofs step away beneath you in uneven lines of terracotta and pale stone. Narrow streets run between them like streams that forgot to become water. A donkey cart moves below with baskets stacked high. Even from here you can see petals peeking through the weave. Flowers travel through this town the way gossip travels anywhere else. Women in aprons head toward the upper lanes with empty baskets. Men cross toward the still houses with bundles on their shoulders. Children carry more than seems fair and look used to it. The town begins early because blossoms do not wait for sleepy people. The best scent often comes before the sun gets too ambitious. If roses are picked late, they soften too fast. If jasmine sits too long, it loses part of its lovely little soul. So dawn matters here in a way it does not in places that live by clocks alone. In Grasse, the flowers set the schedule, and everyone pretends it was their own idea. You can see the fields in pieces between houses and walls. Some lie close, and some climb farther out along the slopes. They look soft from here, you know better. Rose bushes scratch. Lavender stems leave dust on your cuffs. Jasmine picking bends your back into a respectful curve. Yet the fields still look dreamy from a loft window. Distance is kind to labor. Farther off, the land rolls toward olive groves and orchards. Beyond that, the air opens toward the sea. Even when you cannot see it, salt sometimes walks up the hill. This morning it has sent only a postcard. You catch the faintest clean mineral breath beneath the flowers. It makes the roses seem rounder. You lean on the sill and let the town enter you by layers. Someone below sweeps a doorstep. The brush makes a dry whisper over stone. Someone else shakes a cloth and perfumes the lane with yesterday's cooking. A baker opens a shutter. Warm bread smell drifts out and immediately improves every philosophy ever written. For a moment, even ambergris seems less interesting than breakfast. Then the workshop below sends up another pulse of rosewater. Your future returns to its assigned topic. You close the window and turn back. The loft is brighter now, though still gentle. Lavender bundles hanging from a beam make small shadows against the wall. They look like sleeping bats with better manners. A few dried petals have slipped from them in the night. They rest on the floorboards near your trunk. In this house, even untidiness smells competent. You lift one lavender stem and rub it between finger and thumb. The oil rises at once. It is sharp and soft together, clean but not empty. People think perfume is always luxury. Very often it is comfort. Very often it is a shirt sleeve that still smells reassuring after a long day. You tuck the stem back into the bundle and head for the stair. The stairs down from the loft are narrow and worn in the middle. Your hand finds the smooth rail without looking. It has been polished by years of practical descent. Halfway down, the workshop opens beneath you like a scent box. Sunlight enters through the front windows and slanting bars. It strikes the rows of amber glass vials and turns them into little blocks of honey. The limestone floor below still holds yesterday's warmth in places. Fallen petals lie scattered across it in pink, cream, and purple drifts, as if someone gently misplaced spring. Copper alembics sit over low heat along the far wall. Their round bellies glow dull and warm. Their pipes lead to waiting vessels where rosewater gathers drop by patient drop. Bundles of drying lavender hang from the beams. They sway almost imperceptibly in the warmer air from the fire. The whole room looks busy without being hurried. Your day has not begun here. It has merely resumed around you. Celeste stands at the long central bench with her sleeves neatly pinned back. 2 stoppered vials already sit in a row beside her hand. Of course they do. She does not look up at once. She is bent over a funnel and pours with maddening steadiness. Even her elbows seem more experienced than yours. When she finally glances over, her expression barely changes. It is not unkind. It is simply the face of a person who has been productive for an hour. "You are up," she says. This is not a question. It is also not a criticism. Somehow it manages to feel like both. You nod and step off the last stair. The stone is cooler than the loft boards. It also has a little grit from petals and yesterday's dried leaf dust. The main workbench waits near the center of the room. It is scrubbed wood, marked by rings, knife cuts, wax drips, and old stains of famous accidents. On it lies the note. Maitre Bouchard leaves notes the way thunder leaves thoughts. They are brief, unavoidable, and clear only in hindsight. This morning's paper sits under a glass weight to keep it from curling. The ink is dark brown and slightly blotched. The hand is sharp and impatient. You lean over and read. The rose remembers rain longer than sun. Seek that memory. That is all. No amount, no method, no list of materials, not even a sympathetic verb. You stare at the note and wait for the rest of it to arrive in your mind. It does not. The paper remains committed to being itself. Celeste corks her vial and sets it down beside the others. "He means the green part," she says, without looking up. You turn toward her with immediate gratitude and a little annoyance. She hears both in your silence and allows herself a breath that is almost a smile. "Probably," she adds. Probably is the second best word available in this workshop. The first is apparently memory. Maitre Bouchard is nearly blind, which never stops him from noticing the wrong thing in your blend from across the room. He moves by habit, scent, and a confidence that borders on weather. He speaks in pronouncements that sound like poetry left too long in a locked drawer. You write them down because he is always right. You understand them 3 hours later. Sometimes his feedback on your work is a single word. Sometimes it is a long, sorrowful exhale. The exhale is somehow more precise. He has once described bitter orange as a church bell heard through marmalade. He is called civet, velvet with opinions. Yesterday he smelled your trial blend, closed his eyes and said, "Tuesday." Then he sighed like a man mourning a vanished civilization. You are still thinking about what part of the blend was Tuesday. From the back room comes a faint clink and the scrape of a chair. The master is awake and somewhere among his jars. The day therefore possesses authority. You smooth the note and read it once more. Rain, sun, rose, memory. The words sit together like distant cousins at supper. Part of apprenticeship is learning materials. Another part is learning the master's private weather system. You move to the side table where your things belong. The shelf above it holds mortars, folded papers, spare funnels, and 3 bottles no one fully trusts. That shelf has a reputation. It is the notorious shelf above the fixative alcove. It drops exactly 1 bottle per day at the worst possible moment. No one has repaired it. You pass beneath it with the same brief flinch everyone else uses. Celeste flinches more elegantly, but the principle remains. Maitre Bouchard calls the shelf the workshop, reminding us of impermanence. Old Pierrot calls it that shelf. You prefer Pierrot's school of thought. You set down your knife, papers, spoon, and cloth. You glance automatically toward the back courtyard door. You are checking for the cat. La Civette is this morning visible through the partly open door. She sits in her wooden cage with the patient, offended shape of a creature who believes captivity is a clerical error. Her tail flicks once with legal significance. The civet is indispensable, according to the master. Everyone else uses words like difficult, alarming, and why. All can be true at once. Her smell does not storm a room. It threads through it. It clings to wood, straw, hems, and optimism for weeks. She has escaped twice this month. Once she crossed the clean linen shelf. Once she slept in a basket of drying gloves. The gloves never fully recovered, though Maitre Bouchard called the result promising in winter. You wash your hands at the basin near the window. The water is cool and faintly scented from yesterday's herbs. Rosemary floats in it with innocent charm. You dry your fingers on the hanging cloth and breathe in again. Now the workshop smells a little more awake. More citrus has appeared. So has hot metal. On a tray near the stills, rose petals lie spread in a shallow pile. They are darker at the edges now, where the first heat has touched them. They smell thick and fresh together. Rose is never just rose here. It can be lemony, peppery, green, honeyed, cool, dusty, jammy, wet, dry, sharp, velvety, or all of those before noon. That is another hidden truth. Simple smells are usually made of many small disagreements. Your work is not to erase them. Your work is to listen. Celeste slides a small rack toward you with her fingertips. Clean vials stand in it upside down, drying. Her kindness always arrives in practical shapes. You can polish those, she says. This is an offer to begin usefully before you fully understand the rose and its meteorology. You accept with dignity. You take a lint-free cloth and begin. Each vial warms in your fingers as you turn it. The glass smells faintly of dust and old sun. Rows of amber bottles line the wall shelves beyond. Some hold essences, some hold waters, some hold materials that people pay extra not to hear explained at dinner. Ambergris is among them. It sits wrapped and labeled with unusual politeness for something with such an odd biography. Imagine sourcing a rare truffle, except the truffle formed inside a whale and later washed ashore smelling, against all logic, extraordinary. The workshop considers this a normal sentence. Nearby waits benzoin, sweet and soft like vanilla, thinking serious thoughts. There is labdanum, dark and sticky with a warmth that feels almost furry. Storax waits in a stoppered jar. Orris root rests in drawers and smells of cool powder and patient expense. Dried orange peel curls in a basket like scraps of bright parchment. There are simpler things too. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, myrtle, soap flakes, vinegar for cleaning, salt, beeswax, wood ash. The world of scent is half treasure chest and half pantry. This is comforting. You polish the last vial and return it to the rack. Celeste has already moved on to weighing something pale and granular on a brass scale. Naturally, your eyes go back to the master's note. Rain could mean wet petals. It could mean the green sepal under the bloom. It could mean the cool, watery side of rose water before it sweetens. It could mean you are meant to look thoughtful while the answer finds you later. The master enjoys a note that does several jobs at once. From the inner room comes his voice. Who has insulted the morning with uncertainty? This is not addressed to anyone, and therefore to everyone. Celeste does not even blink. You clear your throat and carry the note toward the doorway. The room beyond is darker and warmer, lined with jars, papers, tied bundles, and tools that shine only where hands touch them often. Maitre Bouchard stands at the far table in a brown coat, with ink on one cuff. His white hair escapes at the back, as if it has resigned from discipline. His eyes are pale and narrowed. They do not seem to focus cleanly on objects. They still seem to focus quite well on mistakes. He holds a rose stem near his face, without looking at it directly. His fingers are stained with wax and old green marks from leaves. You stop a respectful distance away. Respectful distance in the still room is measured partly by rank and partly by boiling liquids. Master, you say. He tips his head slightly. The rose after rain does not smile the same way. You wait. He turns the stem once between finger and thumb. Do not chase sweetness first. Sweetness is vain. The truth is colder. You wait a little more. Then comes the long exhale. That is all. You nod as if clarity has descended. In a small way, it has. The green part again, the cool part, the wet leaf under the bloom. Maitre Bouchard sets the stem down and reaches unerringly for a stoppered bottle at his right hand. He is never understandable in the moment. He is also never wrong. You retreat with the note and your new weather report. Back at the main bench, Celeste looks up just enough to confirm from your face that the interview has gone as expected. She hands you a clean cloth without a word. There it is. You take it because you know yourself. Somewhere within the next hour, rosewater, oil, wax, or self-respect will need blotting. The workshop has a hierarchy as clear as the shelves and almost as creaky. At the top stands the master, followed closely by his opinions. Then comes Celeste, because seniority matters and competence matters more. Then come you and your improving ability to smell 12 things at once without becoming philosophical. Old Pierrot occupies a special place, outside normal order. He is the delivery boy, the hauler, the runner, and the cheerful messenger of materials nobody else wants to carry uphill. Because he enters carrying crates, baskets, sacks, wax, oil, and occasionally absurd news, people make space for him, even when they outrank him. This is the privilege of the heavily burdened. Then there is La Savette, who technically belongs to the back courtyard and practically answers only to fate. Below even the cat sits the shelf, yet the shelf still manages to rule part of your day. You hear the front door open before you see who enters, not by sound alone, by scent. A sharp animal note arrives first, followed by salt, then tarred rope, then fish, then something sweet and resinous trying to mediate. Old Pierrot has made his entrance. He comes in backward under the weight of a crate on one shoulder and a sack in his free hand. His cap has slipped sideways. His expression is radiant. Morning, he says, as if he is not personally conducting an argument between harbor and barnyard. Celeste pinches the bridge of her nose very delicately. You step forward to take the sack before it can perfume the bench into confusion. What is it today, you ask? Soap from Marseille, he says. Citrus peel, 2 jars of benzoin, and a chest I am not meant to ask about. This is said with the pride of a man who has absolutely asked about it. Old Pierrot always smells of at least 3 incompatible materials at once and appears pleased by every one of them. He once brought a locked ambergris chest while trailing civet and fresh fish in equal measure. He considered this a successful morning because the chest arrived dry. You help him lower the crate to the floor. The wood thumps softly against limestone. A few petals jump from the vibration. At that exact moment, the shelf keeps its appointment with destiny. One bottle drops from above the fixative alcove and shatters neatly beside the wall. Everyone flinches in perfect unison, even La Savette in the courtyard. The smell rises almost at once. It is not awful. It is only emphatic. Old Pierrot blinks. Impermanence, he says in a careful imitation of the master. Celeste closes her eyes briefly. You try not to laugh, because the floor now smells strongly of clove and accident. From the inner room, Maître Bouchard speaks without raising his voice. Sweep with humility. It is impressive how he can hear a broken bottle through copper, fire, and distance, yet not hear ordinary advice when it concerns the shelf. You fetch the broom and cloth pan. Celeste brings sand to cover the spill. Old Pierrot, still cheerful, holds the door wider for air. This too is perfumery. Not only blending, not only poetry, also sweeping up clove from warm stone while trying not to kneel in it. As you gather the glass, the scent changes. Broken perfume always smells bigger for a minute, as if being freed from the bottle has gone to its head. The limestone floor drinks part of it immediately. The rest hangs low and warm above the stones. Tomorrow, someone will kneel here and wonder why this corner smells festive. You finish sweeping and tip the sand and shards into a pail. Your handcloth earns its keep. Celeste silently offers another. Of course she has another. Old Pierrot begins unloading the crate onto the bench. Pale bars of soap emerge first, each stamped and neatly wrapped in paper. Their smell is clean, fat, herbal, and faintly salty. Soap belongs in a perfumer's workshop more than many people expect. Clean skin changes how a scent rises. Clean linen changes what a room remembers. Also, people simply like nice soap. History is full of very sensible desires. You unwrap one bar enough to look. It is firm and yellow white, made with olive oil and lye, plain at heart and excellent in practice. It could sit by a basin or travel in a noble trunk. Beside it, Pierrot sets a sack of dried orange peel and 2 jars of resin. The bench becomes a little map of household rituals. Orange peel for potpourri and wash water, benzoin for warmth and sweetness and incense or perfume, soap for hands, linens, collars, and the ordinary dignity of not smelling like your staircase. So much of scent is like that. Not grand, not public, intimate and nearby, a drawer opened, a cuff turned, a blanket aired in sun. You think of homes across Grasse where women shake sheets from upstairs windows. You think of lavender sewn into little bags and tucked between folded shifts. You think of rosemary boiling in wash water. You think of a child scrubbed with olive soap, and wrapped in linen that smells of the cupboard. You think of old wood polished with wax and orange. You think of church smoke, caught in wool after Sunday. You think of kitchens where fennel, bread, onion, and ash become the honest perfume of a household. Perfume masters make luxuries, yes. They also live in a world built from many smaller scents that no one writes poems about. Perhaps they should. Celeste finishes weighing her powder and finally looks at the soap. Those should cure in the dry room before market, she says. Old Pierrot nods. And the chest. There it is. The chest is small, locked, and wrapped in oilcloth. It sits on the floor, near his boot, like a person at a station who does not intend to explain itself. You do not ask what is inside, because Pierrot has already informed you that he is not meant to ask. This naturally makes everyone present want to know. The master appears in the doorway as if drawn by secrecy alone. He does not look at the chest directly, yet his face changes in approval. Put it by the cool wall, he says. Old Pierrot obeys at once. This is how rank works when mystery enters the room. Maître Bouchard turns his head slightly toward you, and you straighten. The rose before the room, he says. Then he exhales. You have now received an instruction, a philosophy, and mild disappointment in 7 words in one breath. It is nearly breakfast. The man is efficient. Celeste speaks very softly once he is gone. He means the fresh petals before the warmed ones. You look at her. This time the almost smile arrives fully. It is very brief, and therefore expensive. You move to the tray of petals near the alembic and bend close. At once you understand part of it. The warmed petals near the copper smell rich and open, almost honeyed. The fresher petals at the tray's far side smell greener, cooler, and thinner in the best way. There it is, rain before sun, rose before room. Not the bloom at noon, the bloom in damp air with its leaves still deciding the day. You gather a few petals and a little of the green calyx beneath them. You crush them lightly between finger and thumb, then smell your fingers. Yes, the scent is smaller than the full rosewater below, but truer to the note. It has a watery edge. It has stem and leaf. It has morning still on it. Perfumery often works like this. You spend hours and expensive materials trying to recover what a flower gave freely for about 8 minutes outdoors. People later dab a drop behind the ear and say it smells natural. You nod and do not list the labor. You fetch your blotting papers and make a few quick notes in the margin of the master's page. Wet green, calyx, cool petal, not sweet first. Your writing leans downhill because the bench is slightly uneven. The workshop has many talents. Carpentry is not among them. Outside, a cart rolls over cobbles and sends a soft rattle through the front wall. Inside, the alembics continue their steady murmuring. The day folds more layers around you. You realize you are fully awake now, not because of the light, not because of the work, because the room has finished introducing itself and you have answered. You belong to this strange place of flowers, soap, resins, steam, wax, and poetry disguised as instructions. You belong at least enough to be useful. That is plenty for one morning. You tie back your sleeve more tightly and lay out the fresh papers. Rosewater beads lightly on the copper lip of the alembic and falls into the waiting vessel below. Celeste reaches for her scale again. Old Pierrot shoulders the empty crate. In the courtyard, La Civette shifts with ominous leisure. And on the bench before you, under the smell of damp petals and clean soap, the rose is still trying to remember the rain. Before the town has finished rubbing its eyes, the copper alembic is already breathing warm rose into the room. You step onto the limestone floor in your stockings, and a few fallen petals cling to your heel. The floor holds yesterday's sun in a faint, kind way. The copper still hums softly, as if it never truly sleeps. Bundles of lavender hang above your head from the dark beams. They brush the air with a dry, clean smell. Beneath them, rows of amber glass vials catch the first slanted light and glow like weak tea. You always think the workshop smells tidy until the roses arrive. Then, the room turns full and round and almost edible, like jam, soap, linen, and a church festival all deciding to share one doorway. Maître Bouchard is already at the table with his hands on the wood. His eyes cloud in the dawn light, but his nose does not miss anything. He inhales once and says, "The morning must not learn impatience from you." You wait, because this is apparently an instruction. You get no second line. You get only the long, sorrowful exhale that means you are meant to understand the rest alone. Celeste is already 3 vials ahead of you. Her sleeves are pinned neatly above the wrist, and her labels are dry and straight. She smells faintly of jasmine absolute, even before sunrise, which feels unfair in a way too small to bother arguing with. You reach for clean stoppers beside the fixative alcove. The shelf above it drops its first bottle of the day. The bottle breaks at your feet with a soft, resigned sound, like the workshop clearing its throat. Nobody looks surprised. Old stains bloom under newer ones on the stone. Maitre Bouchard tilts his head and calls the crash the workshop, reminding us of impermanence, which is his way of saying nobody will repair the shelf today either. You crouch with a cloth and gather the sharp, wet pieces. The smell is violet this morning, powdery and cool. Celeste appears at your elbow and hands you another cloth without a word. This is somehow worse than mockery. Mockery would at least give you something to answer. A clean cloth says your failure has already become routine enough for preparation. The alembic matters more than your pride, so you stand and return to it. A low fire licks beneath the copper belly. You can smell heat before you can feel it with your hand. This is why the still runs before breakfast. The roses cannot wait for your bread. The roses cannot wait for coffee, though nobody here has the time to be fashionable enough for coffee anyway. Rose keeps its best self only in the cool part of the day. Once the sun rises high, the flower spends its scent freely into open air. The room gains a lovely smell, and the bottle gains much less. Maitre Bouchard says heat teaches roses bad habits. You suspect he means evaporation. He suspects words like evaporation are a sign of weak character. You carry empty willow baskets to the door and feel the dawn outside. The air is blue and damp, with a little salt from the distant coast. Somewhere below the hill, a cart complains gently over the cobbles. Grasse wakes early for scent, and later for everything else. It is a sun-warmed little kingdom of extraction, invention, gossip, and terrible work-life balance. If anyone ever invents weekends, it does not happen here first. You walk toward the rose plots while the sky still looks undecided. Dew hangs in each hedge and each blade. Your apron gathers a dark stripe of moisture where it brushes the leaves. The bushes waiting for you are Rosa centifolia, and no other will do. They are fat and loose and overbuilt, like flowers designed by someone who thinks moderation is a personal insult. Each bloom cups itself in layers upon layers of soft pink. People call them cabbage roses, which sounds unkind until you see the petals folded tight and many. The shape is not elegant in a neat, courtly way. The shape is generous, crowded, and a little impractical, which is exactly the point. You grow this rose here because grass gives it what it wants. The nights are mild enough to keep the buds from sulking. The hills drain well after rain, yet the morning still lays down enough cool damp for tenderness. The local soil is pale and stony under the top layer. The roots do not sit in sour wetness for long, and rewards it with a scent that is rich without becoming heavy. Other roses can be prettier at a distance. Some hold a sharper note, and some travel better in a cart. This one gives the deep honeyed heart buyers come for, with green, spice, fruit, and that faint clean note like linen dried indoors. The blooms are not economical. They use a scandalous number of petals to make one flower. You might say Rosa centifolia is the luxury model, all upholstery and no respect for the budget. You begin to pick with both hands moving low and steady. You pinch beneath the bloom and twist lightly. The flower lets go with a damp little softness that you feel more than hear. You do not toss the blossoms into the basket. You place them. Bruised petals begin giving up scent before you can trap it, and a crushed basket warms itself from within. Even flowers can ruin their own morning by being piled badly. The best blooms open enough to breathe, but not enough to sprawl. Tight buds give little. Overblown flowers smell broad and lovely in the field, then collapse in the still like tired guests after a long supper. Your fingers become cool and slightly sticky from dew and green sap. The rose petals are smoother than silk and less reliable. A moth sleeps under one bloom, unbothered by commerce. Around you, other pickers move in lines between the bushes. Nobody speaks much at this hour. The baskets fill with soft sounds, and now and then someone clears a throat scented with leaf and damp earth. You learn quickly that the field has a deadline stronger than any church bell. The sun reaches the top rows first. Once the light rests on the petals for too long, the smell loosens and wanders upward where even Maitre Bouchard cannot bottle it. The loss is invisible, which makes it feel almost rude. The bloom still looks beautiful in your hand. It simply gives less when the copper asks later. That is the morning's hard lesson. A rose can deceive you by remaining pretty after it has become less useful. Grasse respects beauty, but it respects yield with a quieter and firmer devotion. Celeste moves 2 rows away, calm as ever, her basket somehow fuller and neater. She picks without haste and without waste. You suspect she was born already knowing how far a thumb should press beneath a calyx. She glances once at your basket and says, "Not too deep." Then she passes on. Her tone is kind enough to be unbearable. You spread the blooms into 2 baskets instead of 1. The flowers lie in a shallower layer, and the top petals stay cool. This feels less dramatic than genius usually does, which is how most useful wisdom arrives. When the eastern sky turns from pearl to pale gold, everyone speeds up a little. Not with panic. Panic crushes petals. It is more like the quickening of a kitchen when milk nears a boil, and everyone pretends this is still a normal pace. Your sleeves catch on thorns now and then, though these bushes are gentler than their reputation. A thread pulls loose at your cuff. The roses keep it as a small tax for admission. By the time the sun clears the low ridge, the field smells bigger and thinner at once. The scent rises away from the blooms instead of sitting close inside them. This is the hour when lateness turns expensive. You carry your baskets back with both arms braced underneath. The petals shift against one another with a damp whisper. If you stop too long, the weight settles and heats, so you keep walking steadily uphill. At the workshop door, warmth meets you like an older relative who has been awake for hours. The alembic is ready. The copper looks pink and serious in the growing light. Old Pierrot arrives at the same moment with a crate of fresh bottles and a sack of sugar. He smells of tar, orange peel, and something suspiciously marine today. You have learned not to ask for the order of causes. He grins as if every scent on earth were an old friend sharing his coat. Once he delivered a locked ambergris chest, while trailing civet and fresh fish in equal measure. He called it a balanced morning. You set the rose baskets on the wide table and loosen the cloths over them. The petals release a cool breath upward. For one quiet second, the whole room smells like the exact moment before a letter is opened. Maitre Bouchard passes his hand above the baskets, not touching them. He judges ripeness by air alone. Then he says, "Good. They still remember the dark." You take that as praise, because no sorrowful exhale follows it. In this workshop, approval comes disguised as a sentence that sounds stolen from a dream. It is never practical in the moment, and always right 20 minutes later. The first work is sorting. Leaves come out. Thick green hips come out. Any bloom gone brown at the edges goes to a separate bowl for the cook's kettle, because even diminished roses deserve some useful afterlife. The clean petals and whole heads go to the still. You do not pack them tightly. Steam needs paths to travel, and roses resent being treated like laundry in an overfull chest. You rinse the copper belly with yesterday's warm water, then with cool water fresh from the jug. Metal remembers old scents if you let it. Maitre Bouchard says copper has loyalty issues, so you wash until the inside smells only faintly sweet. First, you pour water into the base. It shines against the red metal and covers the bottom in a thin, moving mirror. Then you add the roses in soft layers, loose enough for breath and close enough for work. The still takes a shocking number of blossoms. Basket after basket disappears into it with no sign of fullness. Perfume teaches you many forms of patience, and one of them is learning how much beauty it takes to make one small bottle seem inevitable. You press the mass down only with your palms, never with your fists. Bruising clouds the run. Steam is patient, but it likes order. Then you fit the head of the alembic over the body. The seam must close well, or the precious scented vapor slips out into the room and flatters you while robbing the receiver. A workshop can smell triumphant and still be failing. You seal the join with a strip of paste made from flour and water. The paste looks humble, because it is humble. It also keeps an entire morning from drifting away through one careless gap. The curved neck leads from the head toward the receiver. It looks almost graceful, though you know better than to trust a beautiful tool. You drape damp cloths over the neck so the vapor begins to cool as it travels. At the far end waits the collecting vessel, nested in cooler water. Some houses use a long worm coil. Here the neck is shorter, the water changed often, and your arm soon learns the weight of carrying fresh pails without complaint. The fire stays low and steady. A fierce flame would boil the charge too hard and throw up roughness with the scent. Rose asks for persuasion, not bullying. So you feed the fire small pieces of wood. You listen more than you look. A quiet bubbling tells you the water below is turning to steam and moving upward through petal after petal. This is the simple trick that feels like a miracle each time. Water lifts what your fingers cannot keep. The hot vapor slips through the flowers and gathers their light oils, then carries them away inside itself. Inside the head, the scented vapor rises and bends toward the neck. As it cools, it turns back into liquid, drop by careful drop. What arrives in the receiver is no longer field and bush and dew, but a clear, fragrant water that remembers them. The first drops are slow enough to make you lean forward. One bead forms at the lip. Another follows. Then the rhythm settles into a patient ticking, like a tiny indoor rain. You keep the flow moderate. Too fast means rough handling. Too slow means you spend the day watching steam think about its responsibilities. Celeste stands at the neck still, with her sleeves still dry and impossible. She has already labeled 3 small vials from an earlier run and set them in a neat row. Her handwriting is so even, it looks printed by a machine not yet invented. She notices you watching and lifts one brow. Change the cooling water sooner, she says. Your neck is warming. Then she turns back to her own receiver, where the drops behave for her with suspicious loyalty. You touch the cloth and find she is right. The copper neck has grown almost hand-warm. You swap the cooling water before the vapor grows lazy, and silently resent the usefulness of her existence. Soon the room fills with the smell of warm green rose, which is different from the field. In the field, the scent floats wide and pink and airy. In the still, it grows deeper and cleaner, with a wet metal edge and a soft tea note. The first receiver holds cloudy traces for a little while. Then the liquid clears. It looks like plain water, which feels insulting when you consider the labor of several dozen baskets. Yet plain is one of perfume's favorite disguises. Rose water sits in a bottle, looking as innocent as rain. Then you unstopper it, and a whole morning returns at once. For true perfume, the floating oil is precious and tiny. You watch the surface carefully for shining threads or little eyes of scent. There is never enough to satisfy anyone, which may be the ingredient's chief mark of quality. Most of what you collect this morning will be rosewater. This disappoints you less each week. Rosewater turns out to be one of those practical marvels that wanders into nearly every room in town and behaves as if that were natural. Maitre Bouchard says Rose is too proud to live only on a perfumer's shelf. For once, he explains himself. A flower this vain insists on useful employment, he says. You decant the first clear run into a clean glass bottle. It feels cool through the cloth around its neck. Condensed water beads on the outside and dampens your palm. Some of this will stay here for scent work. Rosewater softens harsh blends and wakes dull powders. It wets gums for pastilles, freshens pomanders, and lets heavy resins remember they once had a living brightness. A little goes into hand rinses after handling musk or civet, though nothing truly defeats civet. La Civette herself has left a stripe of trouble across the back courtyard wall this week. The wall now smells expensive and faintly criminal. One shallow dish of rosewater stands near the blending table for cloths and fingers. You dip a square of linen into it and wipe the neck of a vial. The cloth comes away smelling cleaner than cleanliness strictly needs to smell. Another bottle goes straight toward the kitchen shelf. The cook takes rosewater with a practical nod, as if you have brought onions or salt. She uses it in almond cakes, quince paste, syrups, and custards that taste almost too refined to trust. A spoonful can turn plain milk sweet in the mind before it ever reaches the tongue. A few drops in sherbet make summer feel better organized. Even dull boiled fruit brightens when Rose joins it, as though a bonnet has been tied under its chin. You once made the mistake of sniffing the cook's bottle like a perfumer and then drinking from a ladle at once. The result was confusing but pleasant. Your mouth could not decide whether to expect dessert or laundry. The physician keeps his own bottle in a cabinet that smells of vinegar, dried herbs, and respectable worry. He likes rosewater for hot foreheads, red eyes, flushed faces, and moments when a patient wishes to feel attended to by something gentle. A cloth wet with it can be laid across the temples. It cools by evaporation and by reputation, which are both powerful old tools. Some people also sip it with sugar for an uneasy stomach, because nearly every age hopes fragrance might improve digestion, if persuaded politely. No one asks rosewater to do heroic things. That is part of its charm. It soothes, freshens, settles, and politely suggests that a room, a person, or a pudding could compose itself a little better. The housewives ask for it by the flask when linen day comes. A sprinkle goes into rinse water for shirts, caps, and sheets. Another dash goes into the pressing cloth, so cupboards release a faint sweetness each time they are opened. Fresh linens on a bed already feel like mercy. Fresh linens with rosewater feel like a very organized kind of mercy. You understand at once why a household would spend good coin on that sensation and call it prudence. Handkerchiefs receive a lighter touch. Too much, and the cloth announces itself before the wearer enters the room. Rose should hover near the body like a kind thought, not march in first carrying a trumpet. Brides' chests, church linens, and guest room sheets all see their share. Even a cedar chest full of folded shifts softens under a mist of rose. Wood, starch, and flour learn to behave together with surprising grace. You begin to understand why the still cannot wait until midday. One harvest feeds many little needs, and each need depends on the morning holding together. Perfume here is not only vanity in a tiny bottle. It is household management with better manners. The run continues, and you change the cooling water again. The receiver grows steadily heavier. The room windows fog in the corners where damp air touches cold glass. You wipe the flour paste seam with the back of your wrist. No vapor escapes. That small success pleases you more than it should. Maitre Bouchard drifts past and breathes near the receiver. He closes his eyes, though they contribute very little to this process anyway. Then he says one word, round. You wait for more and receive only the long, sorrowful exhale. Apparently your rosewater is round. You decide this must be better than thin, flat, bitter, or tragic. Celeste does not look up from her notes. He means the green notes stayed low. She says the heat was right. Then she adds another line to her own page with that infuriatingly calm hand. You nod as if you already knew. Apprentices spend half their time learning scents, and the other half pretending not to learn from rivals. It is a method with flaws, but tradition seems fond of it. As the alembic gives and gives, the flowers inside lose their bright color. They slump into a darker, cooked softness. Their work is mostly done, though the room still holds them tenderly. When the useful scent grows faint in the receiver, you know the run is ending. The drops keep coming, but they bring less rose each minute. Continuing beyond that point makes quantity feel better while quality quietly leaves through the side door. That is another way lateness ruins a morning. It can happen in the field when sun steals the flower before you pick it. It can happen at the still, when greed asks exhausted petals for one more generous answer. You stop the fire and let the copper settle. Metal clicks softly as it cools. The silence after the bubbling feels almost ceremonial, like the moment after a hymn when nobody wishes to be first back into ordinary speech. You break the flower seal with a knife and lift the head carefully. Warm rose steam touches your face. It is weaker now, but still soft enough to make the skin under your eyes feel newly washed. The spent petals go into a tub for lesser uses. Some will scent soap, some will go to rinse water. Some will be thrown to the courtyard where even the refuse of this trade smells more prosperous than many people's best room. If the harvest had come in late, this whole dance would have gone badly at every step. Warm flowers would have entered the still already half spent. The receiver would still fill, but the heart would be thin, and the kitchen bottle would carry a tired mouth. You have smelled those failed mornings in other shops. The rosewater seems broad and flat, with sweetness but no lift. It is the difference between hearing a tune sung by a person and hearing it hum through a wall. Grasse grows ruthless about such distinctions because everyone here lives nose first. One street sells gloves. The next sells soap, ribbons, pomades, orange flower water, and opinions. It is essentially the Silicon Valley of fragrance, except the stones are older and nobody pretends burnout is innovative. You carry a tray of filled bottles to the window for settling. Light passes through them and turns them pale gold for one breath, though they remain nearly clear. The amber vials behind them glow darker and warmer, waiting for concentrates far richer than this morning's gentle work. Each bottle gets a cork, then wax, then a label. The labels matter almost as much as the distillation, because unlabeled miracles age quickly into accidents. The workshop has learned this from experience and from one very floral vinegar incident nobody discusses near lunch. You write the date with careful strokes. You add the source plot and the run number. Then you blot the ink and feel absurdly grown when it does not smear. Celeste sets her own tray beside yours. Her bottles stand in exact alignment while yours look like cousins at a family gathering. She notices your expression and kindly nudges one bottle straight, which again feels less merciful than it ought. Old Pierrot returns for the cook's portion and tucks the bottle into straw. He lifts it to his nose and smiles with blissful imprecision. "Smells pink," he says, and wanders off before anyone can improve on the analysis. For once, Maître Bouchard approves the description. "Pink is a structure," he murmurs. "You have no idea what that means, but you suspect by evening it will make dreadful sense." The workshop settles into the next tasks as the sun climbs higher. More petals wait for other treatments, and jars line the shelves in their patient rows. A perfumer's day is never one grand revelation. It is many small wet cloths, tiny funnels, warm metal, and one nose trying to keep up. You rinse the receiver and set it upside down to dry on linen. Water threads down the glass and collects in a neat bead at the lip. Even the cleanup smells faintly expensive. The limestone floor warms under your soles now, and the fallen petals at the edges begin to curl. Morning has moved on. The rose plots outside are already less fragrant than they were before sunrise, as if they have handed their best thoughts indoors and kept only the shape. You finally eat a piece of bread near the back step. It tastes plain after so much rose in the air. Plainness feels almost welcome, like a bench in shade. From the courtyard comes the steady complaint of La Civette shifting in her wooden cage. Musk drifts in on the warm air and collides gently with rose water. The result is instructive and not entirely agreeable, which describes much of apprenticeship. Maître Bouchard appears beside you without sound. He sniffs once at the mingled air and says, "A queen passing a stable." Then he exhales that long, tragic breath, perhaps for the state of humanity, or perhaps for your future blending choices. You chew and nod as if this too were clear. In truth, your understanding of his speech arrives in layers, like perfume itself. First confusion, then irritation, then usually by evening, reluctant gratitude. By now the doctor's runner has come for 2 flasks. The cook has claimed one for syrups. The household keeper wants a small jug for linens, and Maître Bouchard has hidden away the best bottle for the scent room before anyone else can dilute genius into domestic comfort. This pleases you. It also teaches you that one rose can live several lives before noon. In one house it sweetens almond milk. In another, it cools a brow. In this room it waits to be folded into something rarer and less honest. That is the hidden trick of your trade. Fragrance is not only vanity on the wrist, it is folded into washing, praying, baking, greeting guests, settling children, and making hot weather seem more manageable than it really is. You think of the field before dawn, and the way each bloom sat heavy with cool air. Now the same flowers move through town as clear liquid in stoppered glass. They become cake, compress, rinse, room scent, skin scent, and the faint sweetness caught in a folded pillowcase. The path from bush to bedside turns out to be very short. It only feels grand because copper stands in the middle. Copper, fire, water, patience, and the willingness to wake before any sensible person prefers. When you return to the bench, another small tray of blossoms waits. Their petals are already warmer than the first harvest. You touch them and know at once they will give less. This is not tragedy. This is timing. A perfumer learns to respect the hour as much as the flower. You sort the warmer blooms for lesser work and save the finest places in the still for the coolest basket left. The decision feels stern and practical. It also feels like the first adult thought you have had all morning. Celeste sees your sorting and gives the smallest nod. It is almost a compliment. In this workshop almost counts for quite a lot. Above the fixative alcove, the unstable shelf creaks softly to itself. Everyone within earshot adjusts a shoulder by habit. No bottle falls this time, but the whole room performs the same modest flinch anyway, like a shared prayer with poor posture. You smile into your bread and rosewater. Even impermanence keeps a schedule here. The sun brightens the amber vials until they glow like trapped afternoon. Lavender dries above you. Copper cools, then warms again under fresh work. The day goes on in circles of scent and repetition, which is another word for mastery before anyone dares to call it that. You rinse your hands in a shallow bowl scented with the morning's run. The water feels cool over the sticky green traces on your fingers. When you dry them, your skin carries a faint clean rose that seems more earned than decorative. That is perhaps the nicest part of the whole business. You spend hours chasing a flower before the heat steals it. Then, for one brief hour after, the flower stays with you as if to say the effort was not entirely one-sided. So you stand again at the table while the workshop hums around you. You straighten your labels. You check the cooling cloths. You breathe in the last clear sweetness of dawn, now resting safely in glass, and prepare to begin all over again. The locked chest sits on the warm limestone floor like a guest nobody quite trusts. Rose petals cling to its lid. Copper alembics murmur nearby, with steady rosewater. Rows of amber glass vials catch the slanting morning light beside it. You kneel and touch the iron hasp with your thumb. The metal feels cool and a little sticky from old salt. Old Piero has only just left the workshop. He goes down the cobbled hill whistling like a man who has never met a burden. He leaves behind a wake of fish, civet, and tarred rope. He always smells of at least 3 wrong things at once. Somehow the wrongness becomes its own sort of talent. Celeste stands by the drying lavender and folds a clean cloth. She watches the chest with calm interest, as if it is a lesson arranged for your improvement. Maître Bouchard stands near the bench with his head tilted. His cloudy eyes miss the chest completely. His nose does not miss anything. He lifts one finger toward you. Then he says very softly, "Moon made patient. There is never a rest." He gives you the long, sorrowful exhale that means the instruction has been perfectly clear in his own mind. You nod as if you live there too. From the back courtyard, La Civette rattles her wooden cage. The sound is slow and deliberate. It has the ominous air of a kettle considering a boil. You fetch the key from its hook by the soap blocks. The key hangs beside rosemary bundles and 2 drying orange peels. Your sleeve brushes a strand of lavender from the ceiling beam. A few gray buds fall into your hair and stay there. The wax seal cracks under the key with a soft little sigh. You lift the lid and meet the smell before you understand the sight. It comes out cool at first. Then it grows warm and sweet and strange. It smells like sea wind, old wood, damp tobacco, and clean skin after sun. Inside the chest lie several gray lumps wrapped in sailcloth. They look less like treasure than weathered candles rescued from a ship. You pick one up with both hands. It is lighter than it looks. Its surface feels waxy, but also dry, like driftwood that has learned manners. Pale streaks run through it like cloud and stone. One edge shines silver in the light. Another edge shows tiny dark bits trapped inside, like crumbs in bread. Old Pierrot has packed straw around each piece. The straw smells of harbor dust and fennel seed. Even his packing seems to arrive with opinions. You bring the lump closer and try again. The smell changes every second you hold it. Now it seems salty and almost sharp. Then it turns soft and sweet, with something like hay, warm wool, and a church cupboard full of old books. Celeste steps nearer without hurrying. She does not ask if you know what it is. This is worse than mockery, which would at least be quicker. You say the word under your breath. Ambergris. The workshop seems to pause around it. Even the bubbling alembics sound more careful for a moment. Maître Bouchard rests his hand on the bench. He says the sea keeps a secret until it is worth wearing. You look at him. He looks past you. This is, as always, considered enough explanation. So you give yourself the plain version. You learn that ambergris begins in the intestines of a sperm whale. That sentence never sounds better for rehearsal. No one in polite company says it quickly. No one at dinner says it at all, unless the table is very unusual. At first, the thing inside the whale is harsh and rough. Then the sea takes over the job. Salt, sun, and years turn it into something almost miraculous. That is the part the merchants prefer. They like a beach and a lucky finder. They prefer not to mention the whale during the first draft. You have seen dried figs with better manners. You've also smelled worse things before breakfast in this workshop. Some ambergris comes from distant beaches after storms. Fishermen spot a pale lump among weed and wood. Then, half the coast becomes expert at looking casual. It drifts for months or years. The waves wash it. The sun bakes it. The smell changes with time, which is the sea's favorite hobby. Fresh pieces are dark and rough and not beloved. Aged pieces grow gray, silver, or almost white, and everyone suddenly becomes poetic. This is the luxury ingredient nobody wants to explain at the table. Imagine a rare truffle, except the truffle starts inside a whale and ends in a perfume bottle. You scrape the smallest shaving from a corner with your knife. The curl falls onto white paper like a sliver of old candle. When you warm that shaving between your fingers, the room seems to lean toward it. The strange marine note settles. A deep sweetness rises behind it. Now you smell dry grass in summer. You smell fresh linen aired in shade. You smell a warm neck after a walk beside the sea. It does not smell like any flower. That is part of its power. It smells like the place where all the flowers want to go. Celeste takes the paper from you and inhales once. Her face stays calm in that irritatingly elegant way of hers. It will behave, she says. You are not sure whether she means the ambergris or your own expression. You decide not to ask. Maitre Bouchard taps the bench twice. He says, a rose is a visitor. This is the room. That one you almost understand at once. Almost. The workshop teaches you that most lovely smells are terrible at staying put. Orange blossom rushes away. Lemon vanishes like gossip. Even rose, for all its confidence, likes an exit. You can fill a room with petals before noon. By evening, the air has changed its mind. That is why the dark little materials matter so much. They are the quiet hands beneath the bright sleeves. They keep the fine parts from running out the door. You grind the ambergris shaving with a few drops of spirit in a small mortar. The paste turns glossy and soft under the pestle. Its smell spreads slowly instead of all at once. It rises from the bowl in layers, patient and close. It feels less like a shout than a memory returning. Maitre Bouchard likes to call fixatives the soul that holds the memory of a scent. On better days, you know what he means. Without them, a perfume opens and disappears. It greets you at the threshold and is donned before you remove your gloves. With them, the scent settles into cloth, skin, and hair powder. It lingers on a handkerchief. It waits in a cuff. It returns when the day warms. The rich ladies of Grasse want this very much. So do priests with incense chests, glove makers with scented leather, and households with linen cupboards full of lavender. Everyone wants a smell to stay just a little longer. No one wants to think too hard about how that wish is granted. You pour the ambergris paste into a tiny amber vial. The glass glows like weak honey in your hand. Beside it sit rose absolute, lavender water, and a little bottle of bitter orange. They seem bright and cheerful beside the gray mystery. Then the shelf remembers its daily duty. A bottle drops from the fixative alcove and shatters near your left shoe. You jump before the sound finishes. Celeste does not. She simply reaches for the broom with the serene speed of long practice. The broken bottle proves to be benzoin. The room fills at once with warm resin and vanilla smoke. Maitre Bouchard nods toward the mess. Impermanence, he says. You suspect the workshop could achieve impermanence with 1 nail in 5 quiet minutes. The workshop prefers philosophy. You sweep the amber-brown shards into a tray. The sticky resin clings to the broom straw and sweetens the floor. Even accidents smell expensive here. Grasse is essentially the Silicon Valley of fragrance, except with more aprons and less sleep. The morning moves on in layers of scent. Rosewater sighs from the alembics. Lavender dries above you. Ambergris waits in its little vial, like a secret with good posture. From the courtyard comes another slow rattle. La Civette has heard the words fixative and wishes to remind everyone of her own contribution. You take the clean cloth from Celeste at last. She hands it over without a word. This somehow makes your ears feel warm. La Civette lives in a wooden cage near the back wall. Sun falls across the slats in neat bars by noon. Her eyes are bright and unimpressed. Her fur is gray and black in soft rings. Her tail moves with the quiet certainty of something that has never apologized. You approach with caution and a little respect. Mostly you approach with an empty spoon and a small glass jar. The raw scent of civet reaches you before the animal does. It is sharp and heavy and almost rude in its honesty. At first it smells dirty in the way strong medicine tastes bitter. There is barn straw in it. There is old leather. There is a hot, wild edge that clears your thoughts by force. Then, if you stay with it, softer notes begin to show. Under the roughness lies warmth. Under the warmth lies something like skin, coffee, and honey left near the fire. La Civette rattles the cage again. She makes the spoon work feel like a personal insult. The scent comes from a little pouch beneath her tail. You collect what you need carefully from the wooden rail and the cloth set there for the purpose. No one speaks romantically during this part. Even Maître Bouchard becomes practical around a civet spoon. You cap the jar at once and wrap it in linen. The smell still escapes around the edges, as if linen were a polite suggestion. La Civette has escaped twice this month. She has left a musk trail across one basket of iris root, your spare apron, and Maître Bouchard's left slipper. Maître Bouchard calls her indispensable. Everyone else calls her other things, though never within her hearing. Old Pierrot once arrived with a locked ambergris chest under one arm and civet on his sleeve. He also smelled powerfully of fresh fish that day. He seemed delighted by this arrangement. You suspect he would smell cheerful inside a chimney. Civet is one of those ingredients that teaches patience faster than praise ever could. In raw form it can bully a room. Diluted well, it becomes almost tender. You place the tiniest smear into spirit and shake the vial. The liquid turns pale gold. The first assault eases. You smell it again on a blotter. Now it feels warmer and closer. It resembles skin after sleep, wool warmed by shoulders, and a faint sweetness hiding in shadow. It is still animal, but in a soft way now. It no longer barges into the room. It sits beside you and lowers its voice. This is why fine perfume keeps such company. A blossom alone can feel thin on skin. A touch of civet beneath it gives the flower a body and a bed. Maître Bouchard says, a scent must have bones. Then comes the sorrowful exhale, because surely you should have known this already. You write it into the ledger as neatly as you can. Your page reads less like poetry and more like kitchen work, which feels safer. Celeste passes behind you smelling faintly of jasmine absolute. She always smells faintly of jasmine absolute. You begin to think she perspires in finished formulas. She glances at your notes. Too much civet, she says. Then she points with one clean finger to the number. You stare at the line and see at once that she is right. You have written 6 drops where 6 grains belong. You scrape the ink with your little knife and mend the error. She hands you another clean cloth without being asked. The cloth smells of soap and sun. You take it with the gratitude usually reserved for rescue at sea. Soap itself has its own place in the workshop. Blocks of olive soap cure on a shelf by the door, pale and firm and faintly green. When you wash civet from your hands, the soap does its honest best. Rosemary helps. Lemon peel helps. Thyme helps more than either. Even after washing, a little trace remains in the lines of your fingers. Perfume work turns the body into a notebook, whether you like it or not. The household women who buy cakes of scented soap do not ask where the deeper warmth comes from. They simply say the scent lasts through supper. That is the whole secret very often. Something lovely stays because something strange agrees to hold it. The courtyard air grows warmer by the hour. Bees drift lazily around the thyme by the wall. La Civette blinks like a queen who is granted audience by accident. You carry the rat jar back inside and place it near the ambergris phial. The 2 small containers sit together with quiet menace. Neither looks grand. Both are essential. This is one of perfumery's favorite jokes. By noon, the workshop smells like rose steam, lavender dust, civet spirit, and sun on stone. It also smells faintly of the harbor chest. Old Pierrot's arrival lingers long after his footsteps fade. Tar rope stays on the lid. Fish salt stays in the straw. Cheerfulness, thankfully, does not seem to tincture. You set fresh blotters in a row. Each one waits like a tiny white flag. On the first blotter, ambergris blooms slowly and almost shyly. On the second, civet arrives too strong, then settles into velvet. On the third, a little rose over both suddenly becomes a person rather than a flower. That moment always feels like a door opening. It is why you keep returning after difficult mornings and accidental spills. Maitre Bouchard comes to stand behind you. You hear the drag of his slipper before you feel his presence. He leans down and breathes over the blotters. Then he says the soul has found its coat. You look at the paper strips and decide that yes, perhaps it has. In this room, nonsense often becomes instruction a few minutes late. There are other dark helpers besides ambergris and civet. Some arrive overland in packets so neatly tied they look almost innocent. Trade brings them to Grasse by mule, cart, and patient human back. They come through passes and towns whose names smell of dust even on the page. A merchant from Lyon sends one kind. Another packet arrives through Marseille after a longer road. Sometimes the papers bear wax seals with cracked little lions. Inside one packet you find castoreum sealed in bladder skin and waxed cloth. It comes dark and sticky, or dry and wrinkled depending on its journey. Its smell startles you the first time. There is birch smoke in it. There is leather. There is a sweet dark note like sap warmed on bark. It does not shout like civet, it broods. It sits low in the mix and makes everything above it seem more dressed. You hear that it comes from beavers from sacks they carry near the base of the tail. By the time it reaches your bench, it has become a trade good and a folded paper mystery. The packet does not tell you the whole story. Trade rarely does. It prefers tidy labels and dry string. Still, you know enough to respect its strength. A touch and leather scent makes gloves smell rich and lived in. Too much makes them smell like a beaver with opinions. Some nobleman always wants gloves that smell of Spain, forest, and courtship all at once. Castoreum stands ready to assist with the first two. Another packet holds musk in grains dark as tea leaves. The note pinned to it names a merchant far beyond the nearer hills. You hear of musk deer in mountain lands so cold your fingers ache just imagining the wind. The trade reaches you by stages, passing from hand to hand like gossip that has become expensive. The musk comes in tiny amounts because tiny amounts are enough. You open the packet and the whole bench seems to wake. Raw musk is deep and warm and almost sweet, but never simple. It smells like fur, dust, dried fruit, and a room where someone has just stood up. You dilute it heavily before it becomes useful. Then it turns soft and glowing with the strange warmth of skin under linen. It behaves like a hidden fire. You do not see it. You only notice that the room feels different after it has entered. You write the origin carefully in the ledger because Maitre Bouchard insists on proper respect for every material. He also insists on a hand so neat, it suggests inner virtue. Your inner virtue remains under review. Your handwriting improves by fear alone. Musk deer, castoreum, ambergris, civet. The list sounds less like a luxury trade and more like a very confused menagerie. Yet this is how fine scent travels into daily life. A court lady dabs her wrists. A priest swings incense. A wife tucks sachets into linen. A glove maker scents kid leather for market day. Behind all those ordinary little pleasures stand packets, jars, cloths, and small unpleasant truths, each quietly doing useful work. You stand at the bench and think how little the world resembles the tidy finished vial. The vial says rose. The workshop says rose, whale, civet, beaver, deer, spirit, resin, patience, and soap. Maitre Bouchard would call this harmony. You call it an impressive amount of rinsing. He asks for a trial blend before the afternoon light shifts. That means you have perhaps an hour, or perhaps 3 breaths, depending on his mood. You begin with Rose Absolute, because the roses have earned first place all morning. You add a little orange flower water for lift, and a dusting of iris for powder. Then comes the part no client praises by name. 1 drop of ambergris tincture, a breath of civet dilution, a thread of musk, the least touch of castoreum. You stir with a glass rod and watch the liquid catch the light. It looks clear and harmless, which is deeply funny. You dip a blotter and wait. Waiting is half the craft and 3/4 of the humility. At first you smell rose, bright and satin soft. Orange flower flickers beside it. Iris smooths the edges. Then the bottom wakes. Warmth rises slowly from under the petals. The whole thing settles onto the paper as if it has found a chair. Now the rose smells less cut from a bush and more worn by a person. It seems to breathe. It seems to remember skin. That is the work of fixatives when they behave. They turn a bouquet into a presence, They hold the memory in place long enough for the heart to believe it. Maitre Bouchard inhales once. He closes his eyes, though it changes nothing practical. Almost, he says. Then comes the long, sorrowful exhale. You have learned that almost from him is both insult and embrace. It means you are wrong. It also means you are still worth correcting. Celeste takes the blotter after him. She waits a few heartbeats and nods toward the base. The civet is shy, she says. The ambergris is doing all the work. You smell again and find that she is right. Ambergris makes the rose glow, but the warmth below still lacks body, so you add the smallest touch more civet. Not a drop, barely a thought of a drop. This is artisanal small batch work centuries before anyone puts that phrase on a label and charges extra for it. You do it with stained cuffs and a cat in the courtyard. The second blotter dries by the window. Fallen petals stick to the sill beside it. When you smell again, the blend has changed. That is the other lesson. Time is always in the room with you. The rose no longer sits on top. It lies into the base and seems held there. The warmth has become skin-like and soft, with no single rough note showing through. You think of a scarf that keeps a trace of perfume at the fold. You think of bed linen aired in lavender and warmed again by sleep. You think of a prayer book that smells faintly of incense, wool, and hands. This is what clients mean when they ask for lasting scent. They are not asking for noise. They are asking for return. They want the perfume to greet them again at dusk. They want it to rise from gloves after a carriage ride. They want it to remain in the wardrobe and on the ribbon and in the memory of the room. Without fixatives, a perfume can only wave from a distance. With them, it sits down and stays for tea. Old Pierrot returns in the late afternoon with a parcel of gum resins tied in blue cord. He smells, against all reason, of oranges, wet wool, and anchovies today. You no longer try to predict him. Prediction is for clocks, and old Pierrot clearly belongs to weather. He sets the parcel down and peers at the open chest. Fine beechwax, he says, grinning. That is another way the world handles ambergris. It gives the thing a nicer name and looks lovingly away from the rest. You sign the delivery slip while he scratches La Civet under the chin through the cage slat. She allows this because she contains multitudes. Old Pierrot tells you a harbor tale about a fisherman who found ambergris after a storm and suddenly became very wise about tides. You believe half of it, which is the proper amount. When he leaves, the workshop closes around its own smells again. The harbor falls away. Warm stone and flowers return. You set the gum resins aside for tomorrow and clean the bench. The spirit stains dry. The spoons go into hot water with soap. Cleaning has its own perfume. Wet wood, rosemary soap, lemon peel, linen, and a faint ghost of everything that happened before. You wipe the ambergris knife on cloth until the blade shines. You rinse the civet jar and still smell civet. Some materials keep the last word. The little trial vial stands alone by the window now. Evening light turns it darker, like tea in a clear cup. Maitre Bouchard asks you to place a drop on your wrist. You do and wait in the old apprentice stillness that feels like kneeling without kneeling. At first your skin throws up the rose again. Then the base wakes under your own warmth. The perfume becomes rounder and softer than it was on paper. This is another lesson hidden in the day. A perfume is not finished on the bench. It finishes itself on skin. Ambergris especially loves this part. On paper it is clever. On skin it grows human. Civet does the same if you treat it kindly. It goes from fierce to intimate with the heat of the body. Castoreum lends its quiet leather shade. Musk brings the deep hum beneath it. Together they make the bright notes feel housed rather than homeless. You hold your wrist near your face and breathe slowly. It does not smell of whale or cage or packet or trade road now. It smells of warmth, cloth, air after sun, and a rose that has decided to stay. The hidden things are still there. They have simply learned table manners. That may be the true art of the workshop. You do not erase the rough beginning. You persuade it into grace. Maitre Bouchard touches 2 fingers to the bench and smiles a little. You treasure this because it happens less often than broken bottles do. He says, now it remembers itself. For once you understand him at once. The scent has a shape that lasts. Celeste corks the trial vial and labels it in her precise hand. She sets it among the amber glass bottles where the last light catches every shoulder. Above them, The lavender bundles sway faintly in a small evening draft. A petal falls from your cuff to the floor. The limestone has gone from sun-warm to merely warm. Your feet feel the change through the soles of your shoes. From the courtyard, La Sauvette gives one final rattle. It sounds almost approving, which is naturally suspicious. You close the ambergris chest and lock it again. The key returns to its hook by the rosemary and the orange peel. Tomorrow someone wealthy will ask for a perfume that smells effortless. You will think very gently of whales, cats, beavers, deer, harbor straw, ledgers, soap, and your own scrubbed hands. Then you will hand over a tiny bottle of Grasse and say almost nothing. That is the hidden part of the work. You leave the bench with your wrist still fragrant. As you pass beneath the shelf, you flinch from habit. Nothing falls this time, which feels almost supernatural. Outside, the evening air of Grasse carries thyme, dust, and distant supper smoke. On your skin, the rose remains warm and close. It stays with you down the lane. It stays while the light thins. It stays like a thought you cannot quite name, though the workshop names it every day. A scent needs flowers, certainly, but a scent also needs a memory to live in. Tonight you smell the memory holding fast. You follow Maître Bouchard down the back stair, where the rose water fades and the stone turns cool under your shoes. Above you, the copper alembics still bubble in their patient way. Below you, the air smells older, darker, and more serious. The apothecary storeroom waits behind a swollen wooden door. You shoulder it open and feel the room breathe out dust and spice. Light comes through one high window in a thin gold stripe. It lands on jars, tied packets, and a scale with two very fussy little brass pans. You always expect medicine to smell sharp and strict. Instead, it smells almost cozy, like church smoke, old wood, orange peel, and warm cupboards. Maître Bouchard lifts one finger toward the shelves. He says the air here has bones, and the bones are made of trees. You nod as if this is clear. It is not clear at all. His next remark is about smoke teaching a room to remember itself. Then he gives one long, sorrowful exhale, which means you should begin working. You start with the palest resin in the room. It sits in a linen sack like rough pearls, spilled from a careless pocket. Frankincense comes in little tears. Each tear is cloudy gold with a dusty skin and a clean snap between your fingernails. When you warm one in your palm, it grows sticky at once. The smell rises bright and dry, with lemon, pine, and something almost like sun on stone. The label says it comes from far hot coasts across the sea. Someone has written Arabia in a slanted hand, then crossed it out and written another port. You imagine bark cut in narrow lines. You imagine sap gathering slowly and hardening in the heat before anyone sweeps it into baskets. The thought makes the resin feel less like a shop thing. It feels like weather that someone has wrapped in cloth. Myrrh waits beside it in a darker packet. It looks less tidy and much more suspicious. The pieces are reddish-brown and uneven. Some shine like old varnish, and some crumble into bitter dust on the paper. You touch myrrh, and then smell your fingertips. It is deeper than frankincense, more earthy, with a dry bite that catches in the back of your nose. If frankincense feels like a white shirt on washing day, myrrh feels like a locked chest in winter. Both are useful, and neither is in a hurry. Maître Bouchard says myrrh is a prayer with boots on. You stare at him and then at the packet. You have no idea what boots add to prayer. Celeste, naturally, writes the phrase down as if it will become plain later. Benzoin sits in a glazed jar with a cracked lid. It looks humble enough to be brown sugar, until you lean close. Then it smells soft and sweet and almost edible. There is vanilla in it, and warm milk and polished wood, and a tiny ghost of smoke. The pieces are lighter than they look. They break with a soft, chalky crumble, and gum sticks under your thumb. The clerk tells you this batch comes by way of eastern ports. The paper inside the jar still holds a faint smell of tar, rope, and long travel. Benzoin is the kind resin that wins friends quickly. Even old Pierrot, who usually smells of 3 arguments at once, grins when the lid comes off. Today, he arrives carrying a crate and trailing fish, civet, and fennel seed in equal measure. You stop noticing surprises after a while. Labdanum is different from all the rest. It does not sit politely in tiers or chunks. It lurks in a covered pot like something the sun forgot to finish cooking. The mass is black-brown, glossy, and so sticky it seems personally offended by fingers. You slide in the spoon and lift a little ribbon. It stretches, droops, and clings with the devotion of a bored toddler. The smell is thick and warm. There is leather in it, and dry herbs, and the dusty sweetness of hot hillsides. This resin begins on the leaves of the rock rose. In some places, people gather it by combing the sticky stuff from the coats and beards of goats. You look at the pot again and find this fact very easy to believe. Labdanum has a definite goat-adjacent mood. Celeste does not smile, but her mouth moves at the corner. She passes you a clean cloth before you need one, which is somehow much worse. You wipe your fingers and only improve matters slightly. Labdanum stays with you like a rumor. Now the four resins sit together on the work table. Frankincense is pale, myrrh is dark, benzoin is crumbly, and labdanum shines like black syrup. They look like four ways a tree can keep speaking after being cut. They also look like a tray of sweets designed by someone very unwell. You weigh each one on the brass pans. The smallest extra shaving changes the balance and makes the needle twitch with offended dignity. The storeroom is quiet except for paper rustling and distant steps above. Somewhere in the workshop, a copper lid gives its soft little clink. You crush a bit of frankincense in the mortar. It gives way with a dry, gritty crackle and throws up a clean, thin dust. Myrrh fights back more stubbornly. It resists the pestle, then breaks suddenly into bitter crumbs that smell older the moment they open. Benzoin softens instead of shattering. It cakes the mortar in sweet brown streaks and makes the pestle smell pleasant for hours. Labdanum refuses all ordinary manners. You warm the spoon near a candle before it even agrees to leave the pot. Maitre Bouchard has you burn each resin alone on a pinch of charcoal. He says you must learn smoke the way other people learn handwriting. Frankincense rises first in a light silver thread. It smells clean enough to make the whole shelf stand up straighter. Myrrh follows with denser curls. Its smoke is bitter, dry, and solemn, like a room that insists you lower your voice. Benzoin melts before it burns. The sweetness rounds the air at once and turns the cold corners almost soft. Labdanum smolders in a dark, glossy bead. It sends up a heavy warmth that sits low and wraps itself around wool and wood. You learn their habits in your nose before you learn their names on paper. One lifts, one dries, one softens, and one stays. That is the sort of lesson Maitre Bouchard likes best. It cannot be copied neatly, and it cannot be hurried. He tells you frankincense opens a window in the air. He says myrrh closes the shutters, and benzoin smooths the bed, and labdanum remembers the body. Then he looks at your notes and says one word. It is mud. He gives the long, sorrowful exhale. This means your understanding is not yet fit for human use. Still, the shelf above the fixative alcove drops a bottle right on time. Everyone flinches except Maitre Bouchard, who calls it the workshop, reminding you of impermanence. The bottle is only orange flower water today. The floor smells briefly, as if a wedding has lost control of itself. You fetch sand and a cloth. Celeste lifts her skirts neatly clear of the spill and keeps sorting resin papers. Her hands stay clean in a way that feels unfair to nature. She smells faintly of jasmine absolute, as always, like a person favored by small gods. The apothecary shelves around you make less distinction than you expect. Rose water sits near cough syrups, lavender near salves, and vinegar near perfume spirits. A jar of dried violets shares space with tooth powder. Orris root lies beside packets of cloves and packets of senna. The same scale weighs things for a sweet sachet and for a bitter draught. The same mortar grinds comfort, vanity, habit, and medicine without complaint. In this room, scent and remedy are not cousins. They are twins wearing different caps. You carry a small brazier to the center table. It is iron, blackened, and lined with old ash that smells faintly of yesterday's rosemary. The charcoal takes its time, as charcoal always does. You blow until one corner glows red and makes the dark breathe. When you set frankincense on top, it pearls, then darkens, then gives up a white thread of smoke. The room changes before the thread has time to wander. The apothecary clerk nods as if this is obvious. He says there is no use fighting bad air with bare hands. You hear this often in town. People speak of air the way they speak of weather, temper, and gossip. If a room smells stale, heavy, or corrupted, people do not simply shrug. They wash, sprinkle, burn, fan, air, and smoke it into better behavior. Fragrant smoke is not a rare luxury here. It is a practical tool, like hot water, clean linen, or a decent latch. You use it in sick rooms. You use it after damp weather, after travel, after a crowded supper, and after anyone has spent too long in bed. A small brazier can move through a house almost like another servant. It goes from chamber to passage, from wardrobe to bed curtains, leaving order behind it. The smoke catches in wool hangings and under carved chairs. It creeps into corners where brooms do not quite win. A housekeeper opens shutters at dawn and lets in cool air. Then she carries in smoke to persuade the room not to fall back into its old habits. Vinegar often joins the effort. Floors are sprinkled, cloths are dipped, and hands come away smelling half salad, half salvation. If fever worries a household, the routine grows more exact. Windows are cracked, sheets are changed, and the brazier makes extra rounds. Frankincense is favored for clean brightness. Myrrh lends gravity, and benzoin gives a softer sweetness when the room feels too harsh. Juniper and rosemary often come in as helpers. Their crackle on the coals sounds brisk, as if the herbs take their duties personally. You do not ask smoke to perform miracles. You ask it to sweeten the air, cut the heaviness, and make breathing feel less like work. That alone matters more than you expect. A room that smells better always seems a touch more hopeful. Even the street benefits from these small acts. A city is many kitchens, many animals, many drains, many boots, and never enough open space. Through crowded lanes, people carry scents the way you carry a candle into a cellar. Not to erase darkness entirely, but to have something steady in your hand. Outside the apothecary, carts creak over cobbles and leave behind damp straw and hoarse warmth. Fish scales glint in baskets, and cabbage leaves stick to the gutter stones. A little smoke from a shop door can make the whole patch of street feel kinder. It is air management before anyone invents the phrase. Maitre Bouchard says smoke gives manners to a room that has forgotten itself. This time, annoyingly, you understand him at once. He sends you to fumigate a linen press in the back chamber. You lift the brazier carefully and walk with that stiff little dignity heat demands. Inside the press, folded sheets rise in pale stacks. They smell of soap, starch, and cool wood with one suspicious note of old damp at the bottom. You let benzoin melt slowly on the coal. The smoke sinks into the shelves and gives the linen a sweetness that feels warm without becoming sticky. The housekeeper approves with a quiet nod. She says good linen should smell clean first and pleasant second. That order matters to everyone in the trade. Fragrance is meant to flatter order, not replace it. If something nasty lingers in the room, people do not trust a cloud of flowers alone. They want sharp vinegar, clean water, fresh sheets, and only then a gracious smoke. This is where the perfumer and the apothecary hold hands without discussing it. One offers delight, and the other offers use, and often they are the same bottle. You see that clearly in the storeroom. Scented spirits stand beside jars of resin, and both are bought with the same sober face. A lady asks for rose water to refresh her skin and her chamber. A clerk asks for pastilles to sweeten a close office where ledgers and men have sat too long. A mother asks for lavender to tuck among baby linens. A priest asks for incense that lifts cleanly and does not sulk into bitter smoke. No one in the room behaves as if these wishes belong to different worlds. They are all small ways of making life bearable and tidy. By midday, your sleeves smell of all four resins together. The mix is strange and rather grand, like a chapel hiding in a bakery. Old Pierrot returns with a new bundle and an appetite. He eats bread with onions beside a pot of myrrh and finds no fault in the pairing. He tells you the harbor stores always smell like half a dozen nations trapped in one room. You believe him because he currently smells like most of them. When the brazier cools, the clerk opens a drawer of pomanders. At first you think they are little balls for a game rich people play badly. Some are silver spheres on chains, pierced with tiny holes and hinged like lockets. Inside, a bit of scented paste or sponge waits behind the fancy metalwork. Others are simpler and much nicer to hold. They are oranges, dried slightly, studded all over with cloves until the peel looks armored. You take one in your hand and feel the tiny nail heads of spice. The orange skin is leathery now, and the whole thing fits your palm like a useful secret. Pomanders have older roots than this cheerful orange version suggests. Long before your own day, People carry little scent balls made from ambergris, musk, resin, and spice. Those earlier ones are called pommes d'ambre, apples of amber. They sound very elegant until someone explains ambergris, and then the table goes quiet. The later orange pomander is easier on everyone's imagination. It is also much cheaper, which helps its success considerably. You make one that afternoon under the clerk's eye. First, you prick the peel with an awl, so the fruit does not split in petulance. Then you press whole cloves into the little holes in even rows. Your thumbs grow fragrant and slightly sore from the work. When the orange bristles all over, you roll it in ground cinnamon and a dusting of myrrh. Some people add mace or nutmeg if they feel prosperous. A ribbon goes around the fruit in a neat cross. Then it hangs near the hearth or in a dry cupboard while the peel hardens. When finished, the pomander can ride in your hand, your pocket, or at your belt. It offers a private weather system for days when the world smells determined. Through a packed market, that matters. You pass fish, onions, wet wool, tallow smoke, garlic, mud, and the neighborly opinions of several goats. A pomander lets you lift the orange close and breathe your own chosen air. It is a portable air freshener without a battery, though admittedly with more cloves. People in crowded towns like that feeling. It turns a jostling street into something you can manage, one breath at a time. The richer sort may carry silver pomanders with compartments. Each little chamber can hold a different paste, powder, or scented wool. You have seen one with rose in one side and civet in another. That seems reckless, like inviting two very proud guests to one chair. Most households settle for the orange. It is pretty, practical, and smells cheerful even after your fingers start craving plain bread. The pomander also carries an old hope with it. If bad air brings trouble, then good spice and good resin might push trouble politely away. Whether or not the air truly obeys, the ritual comforts people. You find that comfort has its own kind of usefulness. You tuck your finished pomander into your apron and keep smelling it by reflex. Celeste notices and says nothing, which is deeply unsettling. Later, she examines your clove pattern with calm scientific interest. She says the spacing is almost competent and hands you a cleaner ribbon. You would prefer mockery. Mockery at least has edges. By late afternoon, you are back among the workshop's familiar things. Lavender hangs from the beams, and the sun warms the limestone floor where petals always drift. The amber glass vials catch the light in soft rows. They look like bottled honey in evening stacked neatly against the wall. Here too, the line between perfume and household care is thin. A fragrant house begins long before a bottle touches a wrist. You help prepare a linen water in a broad glazed bowl. Rose water goes in first, then lavender, then a little orange flower water for brightness. A splash of spirit sharpens the mix. Some households use vinegar in place of spirit when they want briskness over charm. You stir with a wooden spoon that has absorbed many previous batches. Even the spoon smells educated. The linen water is not for drinking, though it looks heartbreakingly innocent. It is for cloth, basins, napkins, and the blessed business of folded order. A housekeeper sprinkles it on sheets before they are pressed. She may wet the corners of hand towels or freshen a bed after the shutters have stood open. Sometimes the linen water goes into a little sprinkler bottle. Sometimes it is flicked from fingers with the confidence of long practice. You learn how much is enough by watching the dark spots bloom on white cloth. Too little does nothing, and too much turns the sheet into a public announcement. Lavender sachets come next. You fill small bags with dried buds that crackle softly and dust the table blue-gray. A little rosemary joins one batch, and sweet marjoram joins another. The herb stems scratch your wrists while you tie the strings. Pillow edges and the deep corners of cupboards. They wait there quietly and do their gentle work for months. If the household is grander, orris root often joins the sachets. It gives a powdery violet note and helps other scents linger like guests who know when to stay. Soap bars dry on a rack near the window. They are plain olive soap at heart, but some hold lavender or a little rose. The bars are stamped while still soft enough to take a mark. Later they harden into neat pale bricks that smell of clean hands and patient washing. A well-run house spends surprising effort on things no visitor sees directly. The sheets must smell fresh when turned down, and the underlinen must emerge from its drawer without complaint. Bed curtains are aired, mattresses are beaten, and wardrobes are watched for damp. Scent slips into all these routines like a quiet helper. You do not perfume linen to hide neglect. You perfume linen to crown care that is already done. That principle comes up in every good workshop. Fragrance cannot save laziness any more than ribbons can improve a burnt pie. Maitre Bouchard says a proper house smells like folded thyme. Then he leaves before anyone can ask what folded thyme is supposed to do. You suspect he does this on purpose. It is his one truly clear habit. In some homes, a tiny brazier passes beneath bed curtains on cold or wet days. A pinch of benzoin or rosemary goes on the coal, and the damp mood lifts. Wardrobes can be smoked after a long shut season. Linen presses can be aired, then sweetened, before the new stacks go in. Even wigs and gloves receive their share of attention. Powders, sachets, and soft cloths help keep them from smelling like old weather and worse choices. Handkerchiefs are especially important. A small square of linen can be washed, dried, lightly scented, and carried as both courtesy and defense. You see people lift them in church, in market, in crowded coaches, and in streets where drains are feeling expressive. They are little flags of self-preservation. Sometimes a handkerchief bears plain lavender water, sometimes it holds a more ambitious blend with rose, clove, or orange. The trick is restraint. A handkerchief should comfort its owner, not conquer the pew. La Savette chooses this very lesson to escape from the courtyard again. You know it is her before you see her because the air changes shape. She trots through the doorway with soft paws and a face of complete innocence. Behind her trails a musk note that can cling to a soul for weeks. No one moves quickly around her. Speed only makes the disaster feel organized. You scoop her up with a folded cloth while she injects in a low, rusty purr. The cloth is lost forever, and perhaps several future cloths as well. The workshop groans with one shared spirit. Maitre Bouchard, of course, calls her indispensable and asks whether you have learned gratitude. You carry the civet back outside and wash your hands with harsh soap. The soap loses the argument, but at least it tries. For the next hour, every sachet you touch acquires a suspicious undertone. Celeste smells one and passes you, silently, another clean cloth. The overlap of shelf and shelf becomes impossible to miss after that. Here are flowers for delight, herbs for cupboards, gums for smoke, and animal notes for stubborn richness. Here is spirit to draw out scent. Here is vinegar to cut it, fix it, brighten it, or bully a room into freshness. The tools do not care which trade claims them. Stills, funnels, filters, mortars, scales, cloths, and jars serve whatever the day requires. One morning you distill rose water for toilet use. That same afternoon you bottle lavender water for household linen and sickroom washing. A jar of benzoin can sweeten an incense, soften a perfume, or flavor the mood of a close room. Frankincense can belong to church, chamber, or shop door without blushing. This is why Grasse feels so busy and so confident. It is the Silicon Valley of fragrance. If Silicon Valley smelled of roses and damp stone instead of ambition and shoes. Every lane seems to hold someone drying petals, boiling soap, or arguing over orange blossom. Work-life balance has not yet been invented, and nobody appears to miss it. Goods arrive from far away and become ordinary in your hands. One week it is resin from a hot coast, and another week it is cloves from somewhere your feet will never know. Old Pierrot hauls them all up the hill from the harbor with cheerful lungs and impossible shoulders. He greets every crate like a cousin arriving with gossip. By evening, the workshop holds the whole day in layers. Lavender from the beams sits over soap, rosewater, resins, warm stone, dust, and a faint surviving insult from La Savette. You sort amber glass vials while the last light leans through the window. Each bottle catches a stripe of sun and then slowly gives it back. Celeste labels a row of jars in her tiny exact hand. You grind a final bit of myrrh and try not to sound as if you were grinding your teeth. Maitre Bouchard tests you without warning. He burns a hidden pinch of resin on charcoal and waits with his head tilted like a listening bird. You breathe once, then twice. First comes sweetness, then depth, then a dark warm tail that lingers low. Benzoin with labdanum, you say. Your voice is careful, as if 1 extra ounce might spill it. He considers this. Then he says, almost. The sorrowful exhale follows. Yet there is less sorrow in it than yesterday, and you take that as a feast. You burn the pear again and notice the myrrh ghost you missed the first time. There it is, bitter and dry, stitching the blend together. The lesson settles into you at last. Smoke is not only ceremony, and scent is not only luxury. In this world, fragrance keeps company with washing, airing, scrubbing, folding, and all the other humble arts of staying comfortable. It lives beside medicine because both aim at relief. A sweet room is easier to sit in. Fresh linen is kinder to skin. A pomander turns a rough walk through town into something almost civil. A pinch of resin on coal can make a close chamber feel newly possible. That is not magic, though it pretends nicely. You sweep the last petals from the limestone floor and set the sachets in a basket. Their lavender dust smells cool and sleepy now. Above you, the alembics burble on in the dimming light. Below that gentle sound, the room holds frankincense, myrrh, benzoin, labdanum, and soap in one calm breath. The shelf drops its daily bottle just as you pass beneath it. You flinch, of course, and save the tray by a miracle so small it barely counts. Only a little violet water is lost. The workshop smells briefly as if a spring dress has won an argument. Maitre Bouchard says impermanence again, very pleased with himself. You suspect he enjoys the shelf more than any sane man should. When you wash your hands for the night, the basin fills with water that smells faintly of rose and smoke. Even the rinse feels like part of the trade. You dry your fingers on linen warmed by the late sun. The cloth carries lavender from the press and a whisper of benzoin from earlier rounds. Now you understand the old lesson a little better. The smoke is also the medicine, and the sweetness is also the care. You stand in the workshop and breathe what the day has taught you. Tree tears, flower water, clean cloth, and warm air all belong to the same quiet craft. You stand in the workshop before midnight, with jasmine baskets stacked by the door like pale sleeping moons. The copper alembics still murmur with rose water from the afternoon. The limestone floor keeps the day's warmth in a thin, friendly layer. Above you, lavender hangs from the beams in dry blue bundles. In front of you, rows of amber glass vials catch the last lamplight. This is the hour when sensible people think about beds. You think about flowers. Maitre Bouchard stands near the window with his hands folded behind his back. He tilts his head toward the dark garden as if listening to a secret. He says jasmine is not picked. He says jasmine is persuaded while the night is still soft. You wait for the rest of the instruction. He gives you one grave nod, and nothing useful follows. Celeste, who smells faintly of jasmine at all hours, ties her apron with one neat pull. She does not look at you. You reach for the shallow woven baskets lined with cloth. The cloth feels cool and slightly rough under your fingers. You know why you are awake at this ridiculous hour. Jasmine does not keep polite shop times. It opens best after sunset. It breathes most deeply while the air is cool and still. By full daylight, the scent begins to flatten. The flower is still pretty then, but pretty is not the same thing. Perfume is full of these small insults. A rose tolerates the heat of the alembic. Lavender even seems to enjoy it, like an herb on holiday in a copper bath. Jasmine does not. Jasmine turns shy and strange under hard-boiling steam. The petals are too tender for that rough treatment. Their scent slips away while you are still carrying the basket home. That is the trouble with jasmine. The flower smells rich on the branch, then grows dull with shocking speed once you pick it. You can almost feel the clock begin inside each blossom. It is not a dramatic clock. It is a quiet and very expensive one. So you go out in darkness. You go while the stars are still above the hills and the cocks are only considering their duties. The workshop door opens with a dry wooden sigh. Cool air moves over your face and into your sleeves. Beyond the walls of grass, the fields lie under a faint silver wash. The path smells of dust, thyme, and damp stone. A few other harvest workers move ahead of you with covered lamps. Their light stays low, close to the ground. No one talks much at first. Sleep still clings to everyone like another layer of clothing. You carry 2 baskets over one arm. They knock softly against your hip at each step. The grass wets your shoes. Your cuffs gather little dark kisses of dew. When you reach the jasmine rose, the scent meets you before the flowers do. It comes in a slow white drift through the dark. In daylight, the shrubs look almost ordinary. At this hour, they seem to glow from within. The blossoms are small and plain enough to fool a foolish person. Your nose knows better. You bend to the first branch and pinch the stem just below the bloom. Your fingers learn the little twist that frees it cleanly. Too rough and you bruise the petals. Too slow and dawn begins to argue with you. Around you, the other workers pick with practiced hands. Their baskets fill with a soft, dry whisper. One woman ties her shawl tighter without missing a bloom. Another hums very low, as if the flowers must not be startled. You smell soil that cooled all evening. You smell leaves with dew on their edges. You smell jasmine opening and already beginning to fade. That last part always seems rude. This is why jasmine is gathered before sunrise or even deeper in the night. The flower is at its fullest before the sun leans on it. The cool air keeps the scent close. The petals still hold their delicate oils in place. Once the morning grows warm, the blossom loosens too quickly. By the time a steam still is ready, the best part is already a memory. A rose will wait on the cart for a little while. Orange peel will wait with the patience of old furniture. Jasmine will not wait for anyone. Jasmine behaves like a noble guest who leaves during the soup. You work down the row with careful hunger. Your basket slowly fills with white stars. Each blossom lands with almost no weight. Still, the mass of them becomes real after an hour. Your wrists begin to notice. Your back begins to compose a complaint. You keep picking. Far off, a donkey sounds doubtful about the entire arrangement. Closer by, someone laughs once and then remembers the hour. The eastern edge of the sky turns from black to blue-black. The change is small, but everyone feels it. Hands move faster. Baskets trade places. Full ones go back toward the road. A boy from another workshop hurries past with a load under each arm. Grasse at dawn is a race in aprons. It is essentially the Silicon Valley of fragrance, if Silicon Valley smelled of wet leaves and sleep loss. No one here has invented work-life balance. You are all very devoted to flowers that behave badly. By the time the first real gray enters the field, your fingers are sticky with green sap. Your nails hold crescent moons of earth. The jasmine in your basket smells thick and creamy now. Under that softness, you already notice a faint tired edge. That edge is the reason the workshop lights stay on all night in harvest season. Delay is the enemy, and delay wears many innocent faces. Delay is a loose knot. Delay is a missing cartwheel. Delay is Maitre Bouchard deciding the moon smells educational. Today, thankfully, delay is only the walk uphill. You return through the gate just as the first swallows start to twitch along the roofline. The courtyard stones feel cooler than the road. La Civette is asleep in her wooden cage by the back wall. Even asleep, she contributes an opinion to the air. Her musk hangs over the courtyard like a scarf no one asked for. You step a little wider around her on principle. Inside, the workshop has changed while you were gone. More lamps burn now, and the room seems to inhale. Copper alembics bubble on the side table where rose petals drift in warm water. The steady sound is like a pot that never quite reaches lunch. On the long bench sit the enfleurage frames. They wait in neat stacks, each one simple and oddly serious. There is no steam here for jasmine. There is no boiling copper heroics. There is only patience, grease, glass, and your tired hands. That is how something delicate gets saved. You wash quickly at the basin. Cool water turns your fingers pink and wakes you more than dignity allows. Then you dry them on a linen towel that smells faintly of soap and old lavender. Even towels in this room carry opinions. Celeste uncovers the prepared chassis one by one. Each frame holds a sheet of glass set in wood. Across the glass lies a thin spread of purified fat. It is pale, smooth, and level as winter butter. You help render and wash that fat on other days. It comes from lard and tallow, cleaned again and again until almost no smell remains. That part is less poetic than the finished perfume. It is also the whole point. If the fat keeps even a strong little barnyard thought, the flowers must fight it. Good fat should be quiet enough to listen. Maitre Bouchard taps one frame with his fingernail. He says the surface must resemble moonlight that has decided to be useful. You do not know what that means. Celeste nods as if it were precise measurement. She hands you the small spatula. The metal is cool, and the handle is worn smooth from many thumbs. You draw the blade over the fat to even it. A ridge here becomes a problem later. Too thick and petals sink. Too thin and the scent does not take well. You learn these things because someone tells you. You learn them again because a tray goes wrong. Enfleurage looks lazy to anyone who has never done it. Nothing in perfume punishes laziness more calmly. You lay the first jasmine blossoms onto the fat, one by one. The petals rest with their faces upward, then sideways, then however they please. They must cover the surface well without crushing each other. They must lie close but not packed like cabbage in a barrel. Your fingertips move lightly over the tray. You fill the corners first because you always forget the corners. Celeste notices. Of course she notices. She says nothing. She only slides an extra pinch of flowers toward your elbow, with almost holy restraint. You continue across the frame in careful rows. The blossoms form a white skin over the pale fat. When the tray is full, you lower another frame on top. The wood settles with a soft square sigh. Then you begin the next one. This is cold press extraction before cold press extraction has a name. You are doing artisanal small batch processing centuries before anyone can charge extra for saying so. You would charge extra for a nap. The room fills with the scent of fresh jasmine from the open baskets. Under it lies the quiet animal softness of the fat. At first the two smells sit apart. After a while they begin to speak to each other. That is the secret of enfleurage. The fat takes in what heat would bully away. Steam asks a flower to surrender all at once. Fat simply waits until the flower starts confiding. You build the stack steadily. Each prepared frame gets its blanket of blossoms. Each finished layer goes aside to rest. The waiting begins immediately. So does the counting. A tray will sit for hours while the fat drinks in the scent. Then the spent flowers must be lifted away and replaced. The same glass will receive fresh petals again and again. Jasmine asks for many rounds before the pomade grows truly rich. You think of it as feeding a very spoiled ghost. By noon the first flowers on the earliest trays look limp and slightly yellowed. Their beauty has gone somewhere else. That somewhere else is the fat. You lift the old blossoms carefully with tweezers and fingers. They cling a little to the surface before letting go. The fat now carries a faint sweet breath that it did not have before. It is not yet strong, but it is there. That first trace always feels magical, though the magic smells slightly of pig. History keeps your feet on the ground. You bring over a fresh basket and begin again. New blossoms go where the dull ones lay. The work repeats in a circle so gentle, it almost disappears. Spread, place, wait, lift, replace, wait again. You understand why people outside the trade imagine perfumers as glamorous creatures in silk. They do not spend enough time with rendered fat. If they did, perfume would have fewer poems and more aprons. Still, there is a comfort in this plain method. The glass stays cool under your wrist. The fat yields with a small soft drag. The jasmine leaves no stain on your fingers except scent. That seems generous. When you look up, the slanted morning light catches the amber vials on the shelf by the wall. They glow like syrup and old honey. A little farther above them sits the shelf. It leans with the lazy confidence of a man who never carries anything himself. No one repairs it. Everyone flinches under it. Maitre Bouchard calls it the workshop, reminding you of impermanence. You call it a daily negotiation with gravity. You avoid its shadow and go on with your tray. Enfleurage teaches slowness better than any sermon. You cannot rush a blossom into giving the truth of itself. You can only bring it quickly from the field. After that, hurry becomes clumsy and a little stupid. The flowers each have their own manners in this work. Jasmine is lush but brief, like cream left too long on a warm table. Tuberose is deeper and heavier. Even before dawn, it seems fully dressed and faintly dramatic. When tuberose arrives in the workshop, the room changes character. Its scent sits down as if it owns the bench. The petals are waxier than jasmine and hold their shape with more stubborn pride. Your fingers move differently with them. You spread the fat the same way. The trays stack the same way. Yet the air feels richer, slower, almost velvet thick. Celeste says tuberose enters every formula as if accepting applause. This is the longest joke she has ever made. Orange blossom comes with less mystery and more brightness. It carries a clean, sweet edge that wakes the whole room. On orange blossom days, the workshop smells almost washed. Even the copper stills seem fresher. The blooms are spring stars with green notes hiding behind their innocence. Their scent feels white, but not soft. You think of folded linen and peel cut with a sharp knife. Maitre Bouchard says it is a bride who knows arithmetic. Again, no one asks him to explain. Violet is the shy one. Violet never enters a room. Violet waits near the door until someone notices. The scent is small at first and strangely cool. Then it grows powdery and green, like clean gloves left beside leaves. You need patience for Violet and a nose willing to lean closer. Perfume often rewards the humble flowers for making you work. Each one teaches your hands a different pressure. Each one teaches your nose a different kind of listening. By mid-morning, the workshop becomes a map of these tempers. Jasmine drifts creamy from one table. Orange blossom flashes near the windows. Lavender hangs above like a dry blue ceiling prayer. Rosewater ticks and bubbles from the alembic in its own gentle corner. No scent stays perfectly alone. Everything rubs shoulders and borrows a little from its neighbor. This is why your apron never smells of only one thing. It is why old Pierrot once arrived carrying ambergris, while trailing civet and fresh fish equally. He looked delighted with himself. The entire courtyard looked less delighted. Ambergris is the luxury ingredient nobody wants to explain at dinner. It is like a rare truffle, if the truffle spent time inside a whale first. Perfume asks you to become broad-minded in very specific ways. You hear the gate open below the hill and know it is Pierrot again before anyone speaks. His steps have the cheerful thud of a man who never doubts his own usefulness. He hauls up a crate of orange blossom and a sack of soap chips. He smells of tar rope, fennel, and yesterday's musk. You sign for the delivery with stained fingers. He grins as if you have won something. Then he goes downhill, whistling into the day. You envy him his empty hands. The soap chips matter more than they look. Household scent is never just perfume in a tiny bottle. It lives in wash water. It lives in linen chests. It lives in the sweep of smoke from a morning pan of herbs. You know families who throw lavender and rosemary into coals to freshen a room. You know houses where orange flower water goes into sweets and hand basins alike. You know that wealthy women dab scented vinegar on gloves and handkerchiefs. You also know that servants scrub everything with soap and hard work first. Perfume arrives after cleanliness, or at least after the attempt. History is full of glamour built on scrubbing. Maitre Bouchard says a room has a top note, middle note, and a floor. On this last point he is annoyingly correct. The limestone under your shoes now holds scattered petals from the early baskets. A few have stuck to damp spots by the basin. When you step on one by mistake, it releases a tiny last breath. That seems both sad and efficient. You clear the floor as you go because petals become sludge if left too long. Perfume work is often half devotion and half tidying. Celeste has already cleared her side without appearing to do it. Her table remains impossible. Her trays line up square to the edge. Her cloths are folded into patient rectangles. Her formulas succeed on the first attempt, which is simply bad manners. You try not to care, you care with vigor. Today she watches while you set up your first solo and fleurage tray. That is the true reason your stomach feels tight. Until now you have helped. You have filled corners, changed spent petals, and scraped clean glass. Today, Maitre Bouchard leaves one whole frame to you and only you. He touches the wood once, then moves away. He says, "Dawn held in cream." Then he closes his eyes as if this settles everything. Celeste stands across from you with her hands clasped behind her back. She has the calm look of a cat observing experimental poultry. You wish she would speak. You wish she would leave. You wish, most of all, that your fingers would stop noticing her silence. You begin by inspecting the glass. Any dust will catch the petals awkwardly. Any smear will make the fat uneven. You breathe on the surface and polish it with linen until it shines cleanly. The glass shows your face in a weak, pale blur. Then you take the spatula and lift a small mound of prepared fat. It bends and holds shape like cold cream. You set it on the glass and draw it outward. Long strokes first, shorter strokes after. You keep the layer thin and even. You scrape away the extra and smooth the last ridges at the corners. Your shoulders settle a little. This part you know. The bowl of jasmine sits to your left under a damp cloth. When you lift the cloth, the scent rises in a soft, rich wave. The flowers are newly picked and still cool. Their stems show tiny bright green cuts. You select the freshest blossoms first. Flat or bruised petals go into a separate dish for less delicate uses. Nothing is wasted if someone can help it. Grasse is inventive because flowers are costly and masters are cheap. You place the first blossom in the upper left corner, then another beside it, then another. The work asks for a rhythm your hands do not yet trust. Too much care slows you down. Too little care leaves gaps. You try to think only of the tray. You fail every few breaths and think of Celeste instead. A clean cloth appears by your right hand. You did not ask for it. Of course you did not. You look up. Celeste nods once toward the smear of fat on your wrist, then resumes being silent and superior. This is somehow worse than mockery, which at least has the decency to be noisy. You wipe your wrist and keep going. The cloth smells faintly of soap and her jasmine formula. That is unhelpful in several directions. As the petals spread across the surface, the tray begins to look convincing. Convincing is not the same as good, but it is comforting. You fill a bare patch near the middle with smaller blooms. You turn one flower so its bruised side faces downward. Celeste's eyes flick to that movement. You immediately suspect a mistake, though you do not know which one. Maitre Bouchard passes behind you on his way to the alembics. He inhales once without stopping. Then comes his feedback. One word and a long, sorrowful exhale. Almost. The exhale contains centuries. You stare at the tray as if more information might rise from it. None does. Celeste reaches over your shoulder with 2 fingers. She lifts the turned blossom and replaces it with a fresh one. Then she steps back without speaking. Scientific interest remains her cruelest expression. You murmur thanks. Your ears feel warm. You finish the first layer and lower the companion frame with both hands. The wood settles evenly. That small sound pleases you more than it should. You start a second tray, because confidence is a plant that needs watering at once. Also because there are many more flowers. Outside the sun has fully risen. Inside the workshop keeps its own weather. The alembics puff little warm breaths. The open doorway lets in a thread of cooler air from the courtyard. Someone in the lane below calls for eels. Someone else answers about figs. Grasse wakes up one practical sound at a time. Your tray waits while the first petals begin their quiet surrender to the fat. There is nothing to do but let them. This is the hardest part for new hands. The method looks active because there are baskets and tools. In truth, enfleurage is mostly a lesson in leaving things alone. Hours later, when you return to your solo tray, the jasmine looks tired. The petals have curled at the edges. The room is warmer now, and the fat has softened just enough to look more satin than stone. You lean close to inspect it. The first breath from the tray is still faint. It is also unmistakably jasmine. Not field jasmine, not branch jasmine, something rounder now, softened by the fat into a quieter voice. You grin before you can stop yourself. Celeste sees this and almost smiles. Almost counts for a great deal from her. You begin removing the spent blossoms. They come away in a limp white layer, more fragile than they were at dawn. A few stick to the surface and tear. You lift them gently with the tip of the spatula. The tray underneath gleams pale and fragrant. It has learned its first lesson. You fetch fresh petals for the replacement layer. This time your hands move more smoothly. Then the shelf remembers its duty. A sharp clink comes from above. Everyone in the room flinches at once with the perfect reflex of long practice. One small bottle drops from the leaning board and shatters near the fixative alcove. The sound is brisk and almost businesslike. The scent rises a moment later, thick resin, dark and sweet with a medicinal little bite. Not the worst spill. Also not a good one. Maitre Bouchard does not even turn his head. He says the workshop has spoken. Old Pierrot, who has somehow reappeared at the door, says it always says the floor is sticky. This is also correct. You freeze with a handful of jasmine over your tray. Celeste has already moved the nearest clean claws away from the spreading mess. Her efficiency would be charming if it were not so pointed. You set down the blossoms and help contain the spill with sand and rags. Sticky resin threads across your fingers in amber strings. The room smells suddenly of forest, church smoke, and trouble. Under it all, your tray keeps breathing jasmine. That is the strange comfort of this work. Disaster and beauty are often only one bench apart. You scrape the glass shards carefully into a broken pottery dish. Resin clings to the blade and refuses every reasonable request. La Civette wakes in the courtyard and adds one indignant cry. No one needs her opinion, but there it is. When the floor is safe again, you wash your hands with warm water and harsh soap. Resin still leaves a memory behind. Perfume materials are like house guests in that way. The good ones linger. The others also linger. You return to your tray before the fresh flowers warm too much in the bowl. Delay, again, lurks in little corners. You replace the spent blossoms with a new layer. Celeste watches the spacing, then gives one short nod. You experience a ridiculous amount of relief from this. Maitre Bouchard appears at your side with impossible quiet. He bends toward the frame and breathes in. He says, "A candle learning moonlight." You wait, nothing more comes. Then, after a pause that feels lavish, he adds, "Better." From him, this is practically a brass band. Your shoulders loosen. The tray looks much the same as before, yet you know it is not the same. That is how learning often arrives here. Nothing dramatic changes. Your hands simply stop being strangers to a task. The day stretches on in rounds of lifting and replacing. Jasmine yields layer after layer into the fat. You begin to understand why this method survives all its fuss. It catches something steam cannot politely ask for. The flower keeps its soft indolic depth. It keeps the fleshiness that vanishes in heat. It keeps the night. That is what you are really preserving in the tray. Not merely petals, but the cool, dark hour when they were fullest. A boiled jasmine can smell thin and cooked. An enfleuraged jasmine keeps its low, warm hush. It is less like a flower in a vase. It is more like the flower breathing beside its own leaves. By late afternoon, the workshop smells richer than it did at dawn. The fat in the trays has started storing the day. This scented fat will later be scraped and washed with alcohol. The spirit will draw out the fragrant parts and leave the grease behind. That comes later. Today your task is simpler and more repetitive. Today you feed the trays. You move among stacks of frames, bowls of petals, folded cloths, and the occasional muttered prophecy from Maître Bouchard. The work settles into your muscles. Your hands learn to judge freshness by feel. Cool petals still have spring, tired ones feel papery at the edges. Your nose learns the small change between newly picked jasmine and a basket that has waited half an hour too long. Once learned, that difference never leaves you. You think of the field in darkness, you think of the dew on your shoes, and the workers bent among the rows. All that cool silence now survives here on a sheet of glass, beneath a layer of fat. It seems absurd, and then entirely sensible. This trade is full of absurd things that become sensible by repetition. When evening comes, the slanted light in the workshop turns gold and then amber. The vials on the shelf burn softly from within. Fresh petals still lie scattered on the floor like dropped stars. Your apron carries fat smears, sap marks, and one small stripe of resin. Celeste folds the last cloth and sets it aside. She glances at your solo tray, then at you. You did not drown it, she says. From Celeste, this is merely a sonnet. You thank her with proper gravity. She returns to her table before kindness can spread. Maître Bouchard makes one final round. He stops by the stack that holds your work. He places his hand on the wood, as if feeling weather through it. Then he inhales and gives the long, sorrowful exhale you now know by heart. This time the exhale sounds almost content. Almost. He says it remembers the hedge. You decide this means success. It is safer that way. Outside, the fields are already gathering themselves for another night. More jasmine will open after sunset and ask the same urgent favor. Tomorrow, or perhaps in a few hours, you will go out again with baskets and sleepy eyes. The flowers will not care how often you yawn. They will bloom on time. You must learn to do the same. For now you cover the prepared trays and set them where the air stays even. You wipe the bench and rinse the spatula clean. Petals cling to the drain and refuse to leave without discussion. You sweep the limestone floor in long, patient arcs. The broom catches at stems and glass grains from the fallen bottle. The workshop settles around you by degrees. The alembics quiet, the lamps lower, the hanging lavender gives off its dry evening scent. Even La Savette has gone still again, which feels miraculous enough to record somewhere. You pause by your tray before leaving. The frame looks plain and wooden and slightly greasy. If someone walked in from the street, they might miss the wonder completely. They would see fat, flowers, and tired apprentices, but you know what is happening inside that quiet surface. You know the jasmine is moving into memory and staying there. That is most of perfume in the end. Not grandeur, not mystery for its own sake. It is household magic, made from very ordinary patience. A basin, a cloth, a tray, a flower picked before dawn. You blow out one lamp, and then another. The room slips into softer shadow. The amber vials hold the last light. The copper stills cool with little ticking sounds. The shelf, for now, behaves. You step into the courtyard and breathe the evening air. The stones still hold the sun in their middle. Behind you, the workshop keeps the day's gathered scents under wood and glass. Ahead of you, the night fields begin again. And you, now a little less clumsy and a little more jasmine-scented, are ready to follow them back into the dark. You can still linger beside the lamplit table where the last work of the day asks the most from you. The copper alembics have stopped their busy bubbling by then. They cool with little ticks that sound like a tired kitchen settling after supper. The limestone floor still holds the heat of the sun. A few crushed petals cling to your shoes. The amber vials catch the slant of the evening light and look like rows of trapped honey. That is one of the moments worth keeping. You stand there with your dropper poised over a clean glass beaker. You try to build a scent that rises in the right order and rests in the right place. First comes the top note. It has to greet the nose and then step aside with good manners. You give it bitter orange because it wakes the air without shouting. Then you add the heart. Rose comes first, soft and clear, with a little lavender to keep it from becoming too dreamy. A thread of jasmine waits beneath it, because even Celeste cannot spend all day smelling faintly of jasmine absolute for nothing. Then the base arrives last and patient. Benzoin goes in with its warm, sweet resin breath. A whisper of musk follows, so small you almost doubt your own hand. In this workshop, that means La Civette has not caused trouble for at least 10 full minutes, which is really quite a record. You hold the beaker near the lamp. You turn it once. You smell the strip again. The top glints and thins. The middle opens its hands. The base sits down and refuses to leave. That is the whole trick of it. It sounds simple when said plainly. It takes all evening anyway. Another moment stays with you when the naming begins. Mixing is hard in a useful way. Naming is hard in a tender way. The formula already exists by then. It breathes in the glass. It has shape and weight and a small private mood. Yet it still feels unfinished until one word fits over it like a lid. You and Celeste try several. None of them land. One sounds too bright. One sounds too grand. One sounds like soap that wants to be mistaken for a duchess. One sounds like a church cupboard with ideas above its station. Maitre Bouchard listens to these efforts with the face of a man who can smell your mistakes from across the room, which of course he can. He takes the blotter from your hand. He lifts it to his nose with grave care. He breathes in. He gives his long, sorrowful exhale. For a moment you prepare yourself for ruin. That is habit in this workshop. Then he says one word. He says, threshold. You wait for the rest of the poem. There is no rest. There is only the word sitting in the air between the drying lavender and the lamp smoke. You do not understand it at first. You almost never do. Then the scent explains him in its own patient way. It opens like a door at dusk. It carries the clean brightness of the outer step. It warms at once into roses from the room behind. It settles at last into resin and skin and the peace of being indoors. Threshold. Of course. Maitre Bouchard is impossible. Maitre Bouchard is also annoyingly right. Celeste says nothing at all. She only passes you the clean label and the good pen. That small kindness feels much worse than mockery, which is how you know she means well. A third moment settles softly beside the others. It is the closing of the workshop, which is never grand and always dear. The tools go quiet one by one under your hands. You rinse the glass pipettes and lay them on folded linen. You wipe the necks of the vials so no sticky ring hardens by morning. You press each cork in with your thumb and feel the faint, pleasing give. You tie a little wax string where it is needed. You write the new name with slow care, because crooked letters can spoil a mood almost as quickly as too much civet. Somewhere above you, the bundles of lavender shift in the beams. Somewhere behind you, the shelf above the fixative alcove chooses its daily victim at exactly the worst moment. One bottle drops. Everyone flinches on instinct. No one even bothers to sound surprised anymore. Maitre Bouchard, without turning his head, murmurs that the workshop is reminding you of impermanence. It is difficult to tell whether this is wisdom or an excuse not to fetch a hammer. Either way, you sweep the glass, you dab the spilled fixative from the wood, you set the surviving bottles back in their ranks, you lower the lamp flame, you cover the alembics, you leave the room in order. That matters more than outsiders would guess. You have spent a full day measuring what cannot be seen. You have listened with your nose more than your ears. You have judged time by what rises first and what remains last. It is a strange way to pass the hours. It is also, by evening, the most natural thing in the world. When you finally step away, Your sleeves hold rosewater. Your fingertips hold benzoin. The air around you keeps the whole day folded inside a single breath. Now the night feels full in the gentle way only a workshop at rest can manage. The stone underfoot gives back its last warmth. The lamps have done enough and ask for darkness. The loft waits above with its plain bed and its worn blanket, and the small luxury of no longer having to decide between one more drop and none. You climb the steps with the faint smell of resin still near your cuffs. A little rose lingers in your hair. A little soap stays on your hands. A little smoke from the lamp follows and then falls away. Nothing asks anything from you now. The day has already been sorted into bottles and strips and one careful label. Even Maitre Bouchard's word has settled where it belongs. The quiet feels earned. The dark feels warm rather than empty. Sleep comes near in the same way a good bass note comes near. It arrives slowly. It stays kindly. It makes the bright parts above it feel safe enough to fade. And below you, the shelf above the fixative alcove has finally spent its one daily tantrum and now hangs there in saintly silence. May your dreams be free of la civet, loose among the lavender stores. May your dreams be free of the shelf above the fixative alcove. May your dreams be free of Celeste's perfectly calibrated first attempt formulas. Thank you for listening. May your thoughts rest easy, and good night.